Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
There was no way they were going to meet. There was no chance. Their lives were like planets orbiting far apart in different orbits. Alex, a law student who had nothing to do at an expensive fashionable resort, was brought here by illness. Last winter he was depressed, and it came out of the blue. Yes, he studied for days and nights, sitting at the textbooks. Yes, he was in practice, where he saw such scum of the earth that God forbid he should meet them on a narrow path. And then one day he ran out of energy all at once. He lay with his back turned to the wall and stupidly looked at the geometric patterns of the carpet. He didn't want to eat, study, or even live. His mother and father were terribly worried. Alex was their only late son, a fictionally gentle, intelligent people. They never pressured the boy. If he was forbidden something, he understood perfectly well why. And all that could be allowed to him, allowed to get a dog, to bring home friends with a sleepover, to go with the class on a camping trip. He never heard from his father and mother no. It was the same with his choice of profession. Alex's mom worked as a people's assessor for a while. They're called nodding fields because they never challenge a judge's opinion or decision. But Mom had a girlhood crush on the judge, an attractive blue-eyed woman of about 45 years old. Mom admired people who, despite a difficult life, retain optimism and a cheerful disposition. Judge Nancy had been divorced a long time ago and was raising a deaf-mute daughter. Her husband left just because of the birth of such a sick daughter. Also a member of their family was a huge Maine Coon cat. Once there was a newspaper with a program on TV. And the cat took this paper as a special kind of invitation, meaning you can come here. The program was removed a long time ago, but we couldn't eradicate the cat's bad habit. They never turned on the TV. Nancy Helen's daughter lived in a special boarding school. She came home on weekends. Her mother was not going to marry anymore and gave all her strength to her work. In the first place, because she sincerely loved her work, and in the second place, she saved most of her earnings. She wanted to take Lena abroad for treatment. Surgery plus rehabilitation. Every day Nancy had to judge people who stole something or didn't share something or beat up or even killed. Most of all, she did not like the cases concerning the division of property, when people who had previously considered themselves relatives and were going to live together for the whole century began to fight over some closet or gold jewelry, and attacked each other with such fury that the civil case right there in the courtroom and threatened to turn into criminal. One time Alex went to pick up his mom too early. He had to wait for her. A young man named Parker was on trial. He had just been released from the zone and returned to his mistress Betty and was just beginning, so to speak, to taste freedom. In the evening they quarreled and Parker stabbed Betty. The ambulance came. Betty was drunk and didn't want to go to the hospital. They could barely convince her to get stitches. She wanted to stay with her example, who didn't understand why he'd taken up the knife. In the courtroom, they told each other they loved each other. "Betty, I'm sorry, there's no one I care about more. Parker told you. I'm going to sit down again, aren't you? I'll be waiting for you." Betty pressed his hands to his chest. This was a side of life Alex didn't know, had never encountered. Parker got 2 years and 10 months. And Betty was in the hallway excitedly discussing with her sister what to send him in first gear. Nancy felt sorry for him, Mom said as she and Alex drove home. She gave him the shortest sentence possible. He had already been convicted once, but his girlfriend was almost on her knees, assuring him that she held no grudge against him. Alex seemed to be thinking about something of his own. But isn't that when he started reading different literature? Not like before. If before he was interested in adventures, now they were replaced by detectives, books about the elusive, criminals, bloody maniacs, their kidnapper, and domestic violence. In Alex's senior year of high school, he told his parents he wanted to become an investigator. Mom was scared. It's dangerous. Can't you choose some more peaceful profession? Dad objected. Alex is not likely to go into a dangerous line of work. I think he'll work in our small town, and soon all romance will be dispelled. He'll have to investigate a case like the one where a homeless man broke into an apartment and stole a laptop to drink it away. So I'd like to know. Wouldn't a chore like this turn him away from the legal profession? Alex wasn't in the mood to open up. So he briefly said, "We'll just have to wait and see." And during the years of study, he really had to see a lot of things that were too cruel, rough, ruthless. Practice was coming to an end, and again lectures were replaced by seminars. And at home he had to study reports, prepare term papers, and then look at the subject of his diploma. I studied every day until late at night. And finally, from the accumulated fatigue, and there was that very nervous breakdown. He became depressed. Parents were worried God knows where the money came from and bought him a trip to an expensive sanatorium by the sea. Alex didn't even want to go. What difference, where he will lie for hours in a fetal position in a city apartment on the 8th floor or in a local room, 100 meters from the sea. But suddenly the change of place did him good. In the sanatorium, the doctor began to treat him the old-fashioned way. He did not prescribe expensive procedures for the young man. Different spa healing climates, sea bathing, long walks, and drinks with soothing concoctions that were given at the bar had to do the trick. And after a few days, Alex felt that the air here was really healing, and he began to fall asleep easily in the evening. Sleeping soundly at night, he stopped having nightmares, and early in the morning he was greeted by the sea, clear as a tear, which washed away all the negativity and got rid of heavy thoughts for breakfast. Alex came with a wolfish appetite from metal, even milk porridge, which he did not like before. At the table, his neighbors were a father with a small daughter and a middle-aged woman. The little girl had a pretty face. Her hair was twisted into 2 thick pigtails. She chattered amusingly, and somehow it so happened that if the little girl was given peaches or cakes, everyone at the table was happy to give them to the little girl. Her daddy, Benjamin, smiled embarrassed and grateful. The middle-aged woman's name was Helen. She was unusually silent. It was clear that she was a wealthy woman. What was the jewelry alone? In the ring and hid a large diamond earrings with the same gemstones attracted admiring glances. Helen's short-cropped hair was kept small, which she dressed simply, but not a single thing looked cheap. And also the open things that women in the South love so much. Helen wore no loincloths, shorts, short skirts, over t-shirts. She always threw on a long-sleeved shirt or jacket. Helen probably did this then to hide her painful thinness. She seemed not just slim, but truly emaciated. Alex thought she must be on some fancy diet. Sometimes Helen sat down at the table, drank only a glass of tea, and left immediately. Sometimes, without any appetite, she would pick at the second course with a spoon and leave the plate. It was still rare when I managed to meet her gaze. If the neighbors at the table were talking to her, Helen answered, looking somewhere past, and her answers were always complicated and her voice quiet, as if she was afraid to say an extra word. Alex never met her either on the beach or on excursions, and they were organized almost every day in the sanatorium. You could see Helen only on the farthest paths, and that's not immediately noticeable, sitting on a bench somewhere, face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat, enjoying the solitude. Alex didn't really care. He was glad that he was starting to come to life himself. There was an interest in life. For the first time in many months, he began to make some plans. Periodically, all vacationers in the sanatorium had to visit the doctor to check how the treatment was going. What was the result? Alex waited for his turn. Sitting in the corridor at the doctor was Helen. The door was slightly open, and Alex heard her voice, characteristic, slightly stated, "To great regret, we were not able to help you. Isn't that right?" Sebastian asked the woman softly. "Well, probably, if I hadn't come to you, I would have been worse off." Helen tried to answer delicately. "You haven't put on weight." "Not a bit." "Blood pressure still spiking," Sebastian listed. "And the psychologist says your anxiety level hasn't gotten any lower." "That's right." Silence. Alex imagined Helen nodded. "That's right," Sebastian summarized. "Until it's removed. The root cause you won't recover. I would recommend that you see a psychiatrist when you arrive. Apparently chemistry should already be involved here. Have him find some medication." No, Alex has never heard Helen speak so loudly and with so much excitement. "It's impossible for me." Even then, I proved with great difficulty that I'm not mentally ill. That's the only reason he got jail time. After all, he presented the case so that I made up everything with an unstable person psycho and make hysterics. Jealous of everything and everyone. Plus a vivid imagination. And it's a done deal. But you didn't do the beating yourself. Sebastian was still talking softly. It's still a basic fact. Didn't I tell you? He somehow convinced my friends, ex-girlfriends, to testify that I've been weird since I was young, that I can cut myself and stuff like that. Okay, apparently the doctor preferred not to go into all that. There was silence. Sebastian must have been writing. Get it at the nearest drugstore. These are sleeping pills. They're a prescription drug. And for the last few days you'll be here, get some sleep and don't think about anything. I strongly advise you to go home. Let not psychiatrist, let psychotherapist. No one will put you on the register. But as you do not realize, you will not be able to live fully, will not be able to enjoy life, if you do not work on this problem. How much life is left in there, doctor? Helen abruptly pushed back her chair. A couple of moments later, the door opened, and without looking at Alex, the woman walked quickly down the corridor. For some reason, all day long the young man couldn't forget about this conversation. He waited for dinner to see Helen in the dining room. Usually she was always a little late. They served very pretty cakes for dessert, baskets with cream and fruit. Alex automatically handed his to Ninotchka, while he looked out the door every now and then. But Helen never appeared. The next day Alex, as usual, went to the beach. Early in the morning he liked those hours, when there was still no one here. But who among the vacationers would really think of getting up at 5? Only a few fishermen could be found on the shore. But suddenly he saw Helen. The woman was sitting on a chaise lounge under the awning, although the sun had just descended. But one could see Helen. But you could see Helen, and here wanted to remain as inconspicuous as possible. She was wearing a denim fiber skirt, long to her heels, and some kind of stretchy sweater that Helen was tangled in. She sat with her arms around her knees and stared in front of her. Alex didn't want to disturb her and was about to discreetly retreat, but then she looked at him. They nodded to each other. "Good morning, can't sleep," he said. Because he had to say something. As it turns out, even the pills don't work for me. Helen grinned. Alex didn't expect her to answer. She hadn't told anything about herself until now. And I was tired of studying. He said, "Have a seat on the next slogan." Once I decided to give myself a break. That made it easier. Maybe you should also not think about unpleasant things. As Helen looked him straight in the eyes. "Can you do that? Teach me. How do I do that?" Suddenly tears came to her eyes. Helen bit her lip and stared at the sea. He could think of nothing but the trivial. But there are no unsolvable problems in the world. Only if someone died, I died, Helen said. Isn't it obvious? Helen grew up with a stepmother, and once wanted more than anything to have her own home and her own family. Though everyone around her admired her father, her stepmother, and all 3 of Helen's children, and her 2 free, younger brothers. Her father was a scientist, a university lecturer, soft in family life, and a professor who was passionate about science to the point of madness. He forgot about food and sleep. If it was about his favorite science, his first wife died a few days after the birth of Helen. On the face of it was not so rare reason, a medical oversight. Later, someone changed all the records. I didn't punish anyone for that story. No one was suspended. And the grief-stricken professor never tried to get justice. Perhaps he wanted to raise his daughter on his own and never marry again. But after a few years, he met a young woman, whom he sincerely admired, as he did. Maria was in love with science, which means that she lived a spiritual life in words, and everything material was of secondary importance to her. The professor very quickly proposed to her, and Maria was not afraid to marry a man with a child. 2 years later, she gave birth to twins and decided that she had had enough of children, although the professor had hired her an assistant from the beginning. Still, the small children demanded too much attention. The housekeeper took over the household, cooking, washing, cleaning. But her mother didn't trust her to raise the boys. Maria wanted to raise her sons in her own image. Spiritual came first. One couldn't put too much value on things. Not even the fact that the couple's child saw toys as living things. No discount was made. A few times a year, the mother would pack plush animals, cars, and the like into a large cardboard box and give it to a woman she knew, a poor woman with many children. And God forbid that the boys would regret something, of course. In exchange for the given toys were bought new dressed boys were also not worse than their peers. But since they were little, they knew not to dream about things. Fashionable backpack or in one ship, which itself will swim in the bathtub, grinds the water with a propeller. But about this or that book, or that recovered father, who had a heart condition, you can dream quite well. With the boys, this issue passed. They obeyed their mother, at least for the time being. But Maria, from the very beginning, tried to apply this method of upbringing and stepdaughter. However, she was disappointed. Helen did not accept the punishments. She cried. One time, she even had a nervous attack. Her father promised Helen for her birthday the same lush princess dress that the girl's friends had. Most likely, the professor didn't understand what it was all about at all. But he had the pleasure of going with Helen to the store and pleasing her with a grade. Helen was so excited about the gift, made on the eve of her birthday, that she put on the dress, not wanting to take it off. When she was nevertheless persuaded to change into a nightgown before going to bed, her stepmother took the dress and hung it up in the closet in the room, saying she would allow the outfit to be worn on holidays. Helen, from whose hands the coveted article had been snatched, burst into tears so that her hands began to tremble. And the next day she had a fever. And instead of a holiday with a cake and candles and balloons instead of fun with her friends, Helen lay in bed in semi-oblivion. Then the father and stepmother had a long talk behind closed doors, and the stepmother backed off from raising her stepdaughter. She forbade Helen practically nothing else. The girl simply ceased to exist for her. If Helen addressed her with any question, Maria answered to ask her father. The professor was so busy, so far from real life, that very soon the girl had to become independent. Sometimes she asked her father about her own mother. Tears invariably came to the professor's eyes. Katya was so sweet, cheerful, with an easy character, that with her death, all joy left the house. Apparently, Helen had taken after her mother in many ways. She tried to arrange for two factions to form in the house. After all, Maria has sons. The girl reasoned, so let her be with Benjamin and Tony, the three of them, and they will not be bored. And Daddy's mine. Otherwise, it's not fair. They're together, and I'm alone. But the stepmother was quick to put an end to her daughter's claim to her father's attention. She believed that no one can be closer to her husband than herself. They work together, they have common interests. And Helen is growing up. And soon she will have her own life and her own spouse. Thus, the girl's relatives were replaced by her friends. She often stayed with them for days at a time. Her friends' parents didn't mind. No matter what, Helen was well, raised in a friendly manner, always tried to help with the housework. Sometimes someone would say, "I wish I had a daughter like that." Helen would only flinch. Apparently, deep down, it was weighing on her. The fact that, unlike her peers, she did not have a normal family, and she really wanted to have one. No one came to Helen's graduation. The professor was very busy. There was some important meeting of the scientific department. He asked his wife to go to the school, but at least for the solemn part of the awarding of certificates. But Maria made a distant sign. "I haven't been involved in Helen's education for a long time. I don't want to be a hypocrite, participating in this celebration." The professor only shrugged his shoulders and smiled guiltily at his daughter. "I apologized for the way things turned out." However, Helen was already hardened by life, and she only grinned. She did not expect anything else. However, the behavior of her father she still assessed as a betrayal and chose a university for herself in another city. Her father rented her an apartment. Here you have to give justice. The stepmother never interfered if the father spent money on his daughter. "I know for myself in the hostel, and it is difficult to study well," said the professor. "There you stay up late, you bring friends. And if you are going to study seriously, you need a quiet and working environment." He went with his daughter, visited her new apartment, gave a generous sum of money for Helen to buy everything she needed. But when the girl became a student, her behavior changed. It's as if she got to all sorts of entertainment. Now she often lingered in nightclubs, carefree fun with new friends. They could drink so much that they could hardly tell the cab driver their home address. And boys for the evening to pick up and afford any other craziness. And Helen dressed in ways she never would have thought possible. She used to wear bright, flashy things. She used to leave her hair loose. She was naturally very good-looking, and she was never without male attention. Another thing is that now she remained as kind and trusting as she had always been. She was introduced to Leo by a classmate. Julia had a boyfriend, and he had a friend. Why not sit together with the same company? They were already settled at a table in a cafe. The friend's boyfriend was running late. But when he showed up, Julia's face stretched. She must have thought she blundered. Finished with the wrong guy. Suddenly he looked like he'd stepped out of the pages of a men's fashion magazine. No, in this case it didn't matter what he was wearing, but that hard face. The sneer. Such bright eyes and black eyebrows in the span of a young girl is covered with pictures of such a Superman. His bedroom. It was strange that Leo still didn't have a girlfriend. He willingly took on the role of Helen's beau. For the rest of the evening, he took care of her, pouring her wine, laughing at her jokes. And when the party was over, he walked her home. Perhaps it could have been limited to a few kisses goodbye. But Helen saw no reason why not. Why shouldn't they end a wonderful evening? On an equally marvelous night, she took her new pal by the hand and carried him back to her house. And indeed, the night was so intoxicating that in the morning both didn't want to part. That was where it all began. The romance spun up most impetuously, and 2 weeks did not pass. Leo confessed his love to Helen and asked her to marry him. She was amazed at such a hasty decision, especially since, having looked at her family, she did not want to get a stamp in her passport as soon as possible. Girlfriends met the news differently. Someone who enthusiastically forbade and began to ask for a wedding, preferably as a witness. Someone who has already seen the handsome Leo and frankly invited. And Sophia's closest friend only shook her head. Sophia was not a prude at all. She was happy to open up at the same parties that Helen was happy to pick up guys for one night. So Helen was all the more surprised. "What do you like?" she asked. "I'm not getting married yet, but you should have seen how beautifully he proposed to me. All honorable." On her knees, with a bouquet of flowers and a stunning gilt diamond ring, Helen showed her hand with a dainty ring. "I said I would think about it." With poorly concealed pride, she said, "And at any rate, as long as I wear the ring, I will be faithful to it." And what did he interrogate Sophia about? It seemed to me that he was very upset that I had not consented. Helen confessed at once. I think he imagined that I would turn, throw myself on his neck, and confess my eternal love in return. Sophia shook her head again. "I haven't had any experience of my own family life, of course," she said. "But I don't often see guys of that age getting married so quickly. So far, I've only seen a few cases of young men proposing marriage so quickly. And you know who they were talking about? Alcohol. And both of them were already incorrigible. Or, as they say, incurable. And they'd already tried marriage, but their wives couldn't take it for long." "You mean he drinks?" Helen laughed. "I'm gonna disappoint you, but I'm a leader in this business. You know I sometimes can't resist an extra cocktail, and he doesn't even guzzle. He's driving. What do you know about him?" Sophia kept up. "Well, his father left the family early. His mother raised him, but she was difficult. She drove men around and paid little attention to her son. Maybe that's what we have in common. Neither he nor I had a normal family. Maybe," Sophia agreed thoughtfully. "But if I were to advise you to look for a husband, it would be among those guys who had a normal, good family, where the father was used to taking care of the mother, whose son saw that." And I lazily pitied with unexpected seriousness, said Helen. "He, like me, wanted warmth at home, and his mother gave all her warmth to strange men. He hoped that she would at least give birth to another child, and he would have a brother or sister to take care of. But no. He grew up a lonely orphan with a living mother. But you're not going to run off and marry him right now, are you?" "No, of course not." Helen sounded concerned. "I've already messed up my studies with these affairs. I have debts for the last session. There's no way I can retake it. and I have to do it. It would be a big blow to my father if I suddenly dropped out of the institute. He's the one who pays my rent and gives me money to live on." "Yes," Sophia agreed. "So far you've had it easy. But if you lose your allowance, you'll have to work part-time like many other students." Unfortunately, things took a turn for the worst for Helen, when she once again came to retake the course. The teacher, who already disliked her, tried to do everything to stump the girl. He asked unexpected questions, demanded knowledge of additional material. Helen had spent several sleepless nights preparing for the exam, and now she had everything mixed up in her head. She ended up getting another D. In the study section, she was told that, in general, if she did not want to be expelled, she had two options: or take a leave of absence for whatever reason or switch to a paid department. The girl was not satisfied with both options, but the second was worse than the first. Studying was expensive. She could not take this load on her father. It remained to take an academic classmate, whose mother was a gynecologist, asked her to make a fake pregnancy certificate. Helen was given a sabbatical leave. The girl decided to get a job in a cafe, save up some money. And if she couldn't recover next year, she'd pay for her own tuition. But Leo, when he found out what had happened, insisted on marriage with redoubled force. "You won't be dependent on your father," he urged. "I earn enough. If you want to, you'll study further. Do you want to?" "No. Don't you like the prospect of being your own boss?" Helen resisted for a while. She did get a job as a waitress in a small restaurant, but she didn't last long. First, she was snapped at by a customer who thought Helen was too clumsy and sloppy. Then her companions accused her of cheating on her tips. In this restaurant, it was customary to deposit tips in a common pot, and then to distribute them. And most of it went to those who had worked here for a long time. The newcomers, on the other hand, got the crumbs. This unwritten rule seemed so unfair to Helen that she actually arranged for some of the money that visitors gave her. In short, the girl was out on the street. And that's when she went to the registry office with Leo. They took the application, and the glowing groom asked her what kind of wedding she wanted. Something modest? Helen asked, "You don't have to spend a lot of money on all this tinsel. I'm fine if we get a table somewhere." "Oh, that's fine." Leo seems to be okay with that. "I wouldn't want to be the lead in a play where everyone's staring at you." Helen laughed at you. "You're the one who's handsome like a movie star." "Not me. I'll be invited. By the way, I haven't been to your house yet. You haven't met my family. My relatives live on the other side of the country and are unlikely to come to the wedding. I'd love to show you the house next weekend. Only now it seems too small. I never thought about it before. But now that I've met you, I want a big, very big family." Helen only laughed. No, she didn't mind children. But first, he'd have to get his degree. The day before the wedding, he gave her a present. They were to go on a wedding trip, but it was supposed to be special, just like he was special. He rented a cottage by a lake in one of the northern regions, but you probably can't swim there. "Yes?" Helen mumbled confusedly. She had assumed that they would go somewhere after the wedding. But she imagined that it would be the South, maybe Turkey or one of the European countries. Even the Krasnodar region. Sea, sun, fruit. A room in a nice hotel. They would get up at dawn and walk along the beach, holding hands. But Leo even grumbled. "You can't find privacy there in season with so many people. The beaches are jammed with excursion crowds, and I want you and me to be alone." And after a few days, Helen was convinced that her husband was right. Instead, he chose a wonderful retreat and a cottage in the woods, surrounded by huge picturesque fir trees. How wonderful the pine needles smelled. It took a few minutes to walk along the wooden planking to the lake and sit on the bridges and admire the view. The water in the lake was the clearest and not so cold. They enjoyed swimming several times a day. The cottage was small, but Helen fell in love with it. 2 bedrooms, the second one was obviously unnecessary. A cozy kitchen finished in wood and a living room with a window and a fireplace. The ceiling-high refrigerator was filled with groceries and newlyweds. There was no need to drive to the nearest town, although it was a quarter of an hour at most by car. Helen had never had such a good time. They would actually get up at dawn, have coffee on the terrace, and then the whole day belonged to them. One could walk along forest paths, discovering new picturesque corners. You can splash as much as you like in the clear, clean water. On rainy days, one could read by the fireplace, listening to the sound of the rain. And that night they spent under the open sky, sheltered by a single plaid, with the same old starry river flowing over their heads. Helen had forgotten to bring her birth control pills. Going through the small medicine cabinet, she discovered they were gone, although she thought she had put them in with her medication. At first, she was saddened by this, but then she waved goodbye. And she felt so good next to Leo that she thought, as it will be, so it will be. She was sure her husband would solve any problem with him. She would not have to think about her daily bread, or about the fact that the child lacked something. In this corner of paradise, Helen felt as if she had rested for all the past years. She felt truly loved and desired. So she didn't want to go back to normal life. But Leo had promised her another surprise, and he was not wrong in promising that his house would make her admire him. She hadn't expected her husband to be such a wealthy man. It was a beautiful mansion on the outskirts of town. It wasn't exactly a high-profile place. It's not the waterfront, but it's near the woods. You could look at it and reminisce about your wedding trip. High, low fence, automatic opening doors. "I'll be safe for you here," Leo said. "No one's gonna steal you away from me. Who needs me?" Helen started to pay and went to look at her new possessions. The house was not that big. A kitchen on the first floor and a living room on the first floor. 3 rooms, bedroom, study. And the third one Leo said would be a nursery. Last of all, he showed her the basement. Most of it was set up as a gymnasium. There was also a small room. According to Leo, Helen's eyes shone for storage of all kinds of junk. She mentally envisioned making this the most beautiful house in the world. She didn't know exactly how much Leo earned, but she was sure that she would have enough for various transformations. And she'd be working soon, too. "Don't you have some blag to find me a place?" she asked at dinner. Helen always tried to turn dinner into a little celebration. Not only cooked something tasty, but also beautifully set. Our table. She'd set glasses, pour wine, and talk. Under such a feast was usually the most pleasant. But now Leo looked up at her in surprise. "Why do you have to work?" Helen was confused. "I always thought that I should not sit on my neck." "You're not sitting on my neck." "I always thought I'd patronize and pamper my wife. She wouldn't have to work for someone else's uncle and put up with his whims." Helen was very pleased to hear this, and the conversation ended there. A week later, however, the young woman returned to him. Now Leo went to work every morning, and Helen spent the whole day alone. In addition, her husband always returned at different times. "You can't guess what time to make dinner so that everything is hot." "I'm thinking of getting a job," she said. She poured her husband coffee again and added, "Well, I'm here all day by myself. You're not going to watch TV or read all day long, are you? I should at least get my license. I could go to a friend's house or shopping. And if you were babysitting, you'd be bored too." Leo looked at her carefully. "But that's another matter." Helen even laughed. "My familiar girls say that the first time after childbirth, and so you go like a zombie with one single dream to sleep. So why should you get a job now and then go straight to maternity leave?" Leo asked. "But I still want to finish the institute first. You can't even imagine. What a disappointment it will be for Dad if I don't have a diploma." Helen protested. "Dad lives only for his science." Leo shrugged, and a few days later Helen took the test and found out she was pregnant. Leo organized a real celebration. Helen wanted to invite Sophia, her closest friend, but he objected. "This is the most important moment in our family's life. We don't need outsiders." But there were flowers and very expensive champagne and ice cream. Helen's favorite sweet, which she preferred to cakes and pastries. Leo immediately said that she would be observed and give birth in a private clinic. No flow doctor who will behave from the beginning and up to the delivery. The most attentive attitude, separate room. Of course, Helen could not help but be grateful to her husband for such care. But privacy has already begun, a little burdensome for her. However, the doctor who brought her, Leo sent Helen to all sorts of examinations, and the results were not too pleased. and you look healthier and stronger than you really are. But things aren't going so well. Something's threatening the baby. Is Helen scared? Not if you follow all the recommendations. The doctor said to stick to bed rest. At any moment, you could become dizzy, uncoordinated. You should be able to sit or lie down. I see. Leo, who was present during the examination, asked his wife affectionately, "So you can't leave the house, dear? And just in case you don't run away, I'll take away your keys." He turned the matter into a joke. But soon Helen actually discovered that a set of keys was missing from her purse. "It's not funny," she said. "You're missing your husband for a long time. I might need something. It's not like I'm going to turn into a forge with no freedom. When the baby comes, everything will change." He promised her, and Helen had to accept it. Leo locked the gate securely when he left in the mornings. So Helen really felt like a prisoner trapped within four walls. But at least I can have visitors. She couldn't stand it. Leo raised his eyebrows. "Who do you want to see?" "At least Sophia. It's been forever since we've met." He thought for a few moments. "Okay, invite her over for the weekend when I'm home too." Sunday night went wonderfully. Sophia had brought good wine and some toys for the baby to grow up with, she joked. The couple gave her a tour of the house, and then all sat together on the rug in the living room, lapping light sweet wine and talking. The terms of the news had piled up. Helen, too, wanted to talk about her life, to complain about how much she missed her. But Leo was sitting next to her. It was kind of uncomfortable in front of him. If he'd gone somewhere, well, even for a quarter of an hour. But he wouldn't leave his girlfriends. True, he behaved with extraordinary gallantry and tried to charm Sophia. The only moment they had alone together was when Sophia asked to go to the bathroom. "I'll show you the bathroom." Helen jumped up. "How do you live?" Sophia asked. As she slept, nodded her hands. Even if Leo stood under the door from behind the noise of the water, he heard nothing. Everything is normal. "Well, yeah, pretty much." Helen really wanted to tell her how much she longed. But she was afraid Sophia wouldn't understand. After all, the way she was living now was dictated by Leo's care for her. "I thought you were locked up like a bird in a cage." "No," Sophia asked obliquely. "He's a good macho guy, but if you decide to run away from him, I understand. And by the way, if you want, you can stay at my place." Sophia had a small apartment, a studio, where she had lovingly designed every corner. There was room for bookshelves, a good record player, and even a small bar. And the loggia Sophia spotted and arranged there a working office, combined with a greenhouse. But only a baby crib will not fit there. And yet Helen had tears in her eyes. Sophia, it turns out, understood her. "Thank you," she whispered. That same evening, when she went to bed, Helen asked her husband, "Can Sophia come to visit us more often? I have more fun with her. I won't have to ask to go anywhere." If she was hoping to take her husband away, she was wrong. "Your girlfriend will not come to our house again," Leo said. "Why not?" Helen was stunned. "You should have thought of bringing wine to a pregnant woman." "I hardly ever drink." Helen justified herself. "You don't need a glass, but I wouldn't let you have more. If she shows up next time without me, how do I know what she's carrying? Maybe a bottle of whiskey. I assure you she wouldn't think twice. And I say what would. You're a kind soul. You don't know how jealous people can be. If something happened to your baby, your Sophia will comfort you. And in your heart, you'll be glad it happened. You don't think she's jealous of you now. That you have a husband, a nice house, that you're pregnant, and that she has a job and a room the size of a dog kennel. I bet she drinks a lot and is willing to sleep with anyone she meets." Helen was hit by a wave of icy indignation. "You don't know her at all," she said coldly. "You haven't told me anything about your family. When I asked about it, you gave me complicated answers. But I can tell you about my family. I had no mother. I grew up with a stepmother. I never had a sister. Well, Sophia is the sister I've been missing my whole life. And she successfully dragged you to all sorts of companies, all sorts of bad places. What kind of hot spots? I'm imagining things. If we went to coffee shops or nightclubs, then I'm in the clear. You do realize what kind of people go there, right? Men come to eat girls like this." "I'm a girl," Helen said. I didn't say that, but with that dog you could act like a girl. Look, I'm not asking you where exactly you work or who you're around. You know I run a security firm, and it's all men. So maybe you're hooking up with them. Romans asked Helen in anger. He slapped her on the cheek. No one had ever hit her before, and to raise a hand on a pregnant woman. Helen recoiled and cried. There is no greater insult to a man than what you just said to me. Leo walked out, slamming the door. Helen cried for a long time, but the room was so quiet, not a single sound coming from the room, and she gradually began to calm down. The very surroundings had a calming effect on her. It was so beautiful in her room. Everything in soft pink colors. In the end, she came to realize that it was largely her own fault. Men have certain red lines they can't cross, and she had apparently violated the unspoken prohibition. Still, Helen thought that her husband would apologize to her, and she would try to forget the horrible scene. She and her husband spent the night apart. Helen fell into an unexpectedly deep sleep after many tears. She woke up several times, and each time she checked to see if Leo was there. It seemed to her that he must be there. After all, loving people always understand if they have hurt someone else and try to earn forgiveness, even if they are not guilty. But Leo did not come. In the morning, Helen heard that her husband was going to work. She couldn't believe that he was going for nothing. Besides, she wanted to eat too. So she casually walked into the kitchen where he was finishing breakfast, poured herself a cup of coffee, and made a sandwich. What should I buy today? Leo asked, as if nothing was wrong. Will you write a list? She usually gave him a shopping list with her, except for the very first few days when she was nauseous. So it lay in a thumb drive. But now Helen opened her eyes in surprise. It was as if Leo had forgotten everything that had happened yesterday. You hit me, she said. And I was surprised at him. It just couldn't have happened. You had a bad dream. Do you remember anything? No, I shook my head. But if I upset you, I'm sorry. So what should I buy today? Helen made a short list of groceries. When her husband left, she wanted to lounge on the couch with her phone, as usual. She was used to reading books from digital libraries lately, but she couldn't find her cell phone. In vain. She looked for it all over the room, checked the bathroom, looked in every nook and cranny in the living room and kitchen. There was no cell phone. She remembered that there was a landline in the house and decided to call her own cell phone from it. Then she would hear a familiar tune and find the missing cell phone. But it turned out that the landline phone was disconnected. That day, Helen was unusually bored. She didn't know what to do until her husband arrived. She had long since weaned herself off the television. Walking was only possible in the small garden. You can't go beyond the fence. The gate is locked. Shit, she can't even contact Sophia. If the cell phone is somehow lost, Sophia could buy a new one, and she would give her friend the money later. When Leo arrived in the evening, the first thing Helen asked him was if he knew where the phone was. Though in her heart she was sure he would answer no. All the more startled by his words. You don't want the phone. How's that? She sat like that. You'll be calling your friends, talking about your life to me. And I don't want anyone dragging my name around. Especially not dirty girls like Sophia. And you say you don't remember the scene last night. Helen summarized bitterly. I'm afraid it will be exactly the same today. I don't know what you mean, but all that cell phone service and radiation. I don't think it's good for the baby. Helen laughed, but it sounded almost hysterical. Look, this isn't the Stone Age, and everyone has a cell phone. I don't part with mine. And I know his voice was calm, like he was talking to a baby, but it's not good for you. Look at you now, your nerves are shot, and I need to keep you safe from any anxiety. Give me the phone, and I'll calm down. I brought you something else. Leo went out and came back with a small flat box. You say you mostly read books on the internet? I bought you an ebook, and at my request, they put 100 detectives and love stories in it. When you read it, everyone tells me, I'll announce your library. But that's not what this is. Do you have a TV for the news? What else do you need? I need to be able to contact someone. You're out all day. What if something happens to me? Get sick. I'd have to call an ambulance to get you out of work. Now I won't leave you so long. Leo said affectionately. "I'll stop by in the middle of the day to see if you're all right." And he did visit her once or twice a day. He always came at different times, and he didn't stay long, sometimes only for a few minutes, to make sure everything was all right. Helen panted, wandering around the rooms. An e-book couldn't replace the internet for her. She realized that she had complained about loneliness for nothing before. She could sit on forums, chat in chat rooms. She could contact the same Sophia through social networks. Now she was deprived of all that. The books her husband had downloaded for her were cheap reading and couldn't occupy her thoughts. Does he really care about me that much? She asked herself, but it's really choking me. Hormones were probably affecting her too, because she didn't recognize herself. Every now and then she started crying like a hurt child and felt very unhappy. A few days later, Helen told her husband, "I can't go on like this. I'm leaving you." He was just finishing his lunch and gave a marvelous green pea. Leo raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Where are you going to go? Shouldn't you care?" She answered defiantly. "I understand," he said calmly. Now he spoke with more than just that tone. "You wanted to live with your Sophia until the divorce was finalized, and then have a baby, get a job, and get child support. I painted the right picture. So what? 1,000 women live like that?" Helen twitchy chin. "But you're not going to live like that. First of all, you're not going anywhere because you're carrying my baby, and I'm not going to give you the opportunity to steal it from me. I'm not going to steal." Helen realized for the first time that her husband might not just let her go. Just like that. "Will you be able to see him?" He shook his head. "I don't like it. But don't you realize what's made me unhappy? You're not yourself right now." Leo took his time and poured coffee for both of them. "Then when the baby comes, you'll think you're crazy for a while. It's okay, it'll get better. You'll see. But you can't stop me from leaving. You're a free man. But so am I. Are you sick now?" Leo tried to stroke his wife's arm, but she pulled her back. The sick are taken care of without asking for their consent. "I will leave," Helen said not so confidently. "No, you won't. But if you want to, you can try." When did Leo leave? Helen walked around the castle one more time and realized that her husband was right. Maybe a man trained and physically strong would be able to get out of here. But not a pregnant woman whose eyes darken every now and then and for whom physical effort is contraindicated. The wall is high and topped with metal peaks. She has no phone now. The gate is on an automatic lock. The house is set back from the other buildings, and there's no way that if she screams, anyone will hear her. And besides, it would be a lot easier for Leo to make her look crazy. Helen remembered an acquaintance who had an elderly mother. Emily would go to work in the mornings, and the old lady would open the window and scream that she was being murdered. Called her daughter for help. Her greatest fear was that her mother would fall out. So she finally put bars on the windows. The mother was sedated, but nothing worked. Her screams echoed down the street. Another thing, the neighbors were aware of what was going on and did not rush old ladies to help. Nevertheless, Helen tried to climb up to the attic. The roof of the house was flat, and part of it was a kind of observation platform. But Leo had made provision for that. The entrance to the attic was locked. The young woman cried once again. In her heart, she hoped that she would somehow find a way to escape and would be among her own people today. But it turned out that escape would have to be postponed until later. As a last resort, she would run away from the maternity hospital. Better yet, she'll tell everyone around her. The doctor, the nurses, the women in labor. That Leo turned the house into a prison. He's kept her imprisoned her entire pregnancy, and now needed to help her sneak out of the maternity ward with the baby. Helen didn't much care where she went. She could stay at Sophia's for a while. Cramped, but not too cramped. Then maybe she could find some work so that she could afford a nanny for the baby. At the very least, she'll move in with her father. He wouldn't kick her out of the house. Thoughts of her father brought her back to the institute, which Helen had forgotten all about. Her father still thinks she's studying, doesn't he? He sends her money for the apartment, and it is saved on her card. But Leo has the card too, as well as all family documents, passports, policies. He hid them all in the home safe under the pretext that Helen's absent-mindedness is not worth losing documents at the most inopportune moment. When we get to the maternity hospital, we'll find out that you left everything at home and can't remember where your passport is." That's when Leo was telling her all this. His words had sounded like a joke, but now Helen realized that she was the door behind which she was, figuratively speaking, locked. Another shift appeared. It would be okay if she could get away. Sophia will give her money for a cab, and her father won't ask for his own daughter's papers. If Leo won't give her passport back, Helen will recover it later. She'll say she lost it. In the meantime, maybe try another way to give up food. If she goes on a hunger strike, Leo will have to do what she wants. After all, he's so looking forward to this baby. He will not allow Helen to starve. It could be bad for the baby. And on this day, she didn't make dinner. When her husband returned, Helen sat in her room on the wide windowsill and looked out of the window. It was raining. There was a fence and wet lilac bushes in front of her eyes. She knew her husband was about to make sure there was nothing to eat if he made a scandal. Well, Helen was ready for that. Instead, Leo was rattling around in the kitchen. Half an hour later, he walked in on her. "Let's go to dinner. Everything's on the table." "I'm not hungry," Helen said without turning from the window. "You don't feel well." He became alarmed. "Can you take it that way? There's hot soup and rolls waiting for you. Coffee, of course." Helen was very hungry, but she was sure she could stand it, and only shook her head negatively, saying, "I won't go." "If you don't break the regimen," Leo kept talking to her like a child, "we'll go out this weekend. We'll walk in the park, have ice cream. You've really been away from home, haven't you?" Helen couldn't believe her ears. Leo couldn't realize that when she was outside the gate, she would leave him immediately. She'd jump out of the car. For that matter. Yeah, he nodded. "I'm not kidding." "Well said, Helen. I'll be right down." She cleaned herself up a bit, washed her face, and changed her pajamas for a robe. She didn't like to walk around, unraveled. But until this minute, her mood had been so bad that she didn't feel like doing anything. Now it was different. "So pull yourself together," her husband said to her at dinner. "If you don't feel well, of course we won't go anywhere. But if everything will be normal, then I intend to treat you a little. Shall we go to the store and get you something? You'll soon be able to wear the clothes you're used to." It was Monday, and all week Helen had behaved exemplarily. Now she had no doubt that she would be free before the deadline. She did the usual household chores, and at the same time her head was full of thoughts. If Sophia had guessed and come to her house when her husband was away, they could have talked over the fence. Maybe somehow a friend could give her the phone. But in any case, Sophia wouldn't refuse to take her in. Helen had no doubt about that. On Saturday morning, Helen looked at her husband, as if asking what their plans were for the day. "Unfortunately, I'm being called into work today," Leo said. "Getting my second cup of coffee. Do you remember what you promised me?" The young woman couldn't stand it. What did he pretend not to remember? But then he laughed. "Of course, I know how much you're looking forward to it. Let's go tomorrow right from the morning." It was rainy on Sunday, but Leo was not going to cancel the trip. First, he brought Helen to the country square. The rain had already stopped freezing, but there was not a single person in the alleys. The young woman was very disappointed at the circumstance. If she just tried to run away from Leo here, he would catch up with her in a few seconds, and there was no one to turn to for help. At this time, the husband received a phone call. "There is a slight change of plans," he told Helen. "I have to be in the office now, but..." It dragged on interminably. "You can go shopping by yourself. I'll give you the card, if you don't mind." Helen could only nod. "I'll give you 2 hours. I'll call a cab, then I'll wait for you at home." Leo sat his wife down himself, pulled up his car, and gave the address Center City, the very street that was considered the center of big and small stores. Helen watched in the small mirror as her husband's figure moved away. "Change of plans," she told the cab driver. "As soon as the car rounded the corner, I'll stop by a friend's house first." If only she had ended up at Sophia's, she would have nothing more to fear. Helen didn't regret not bringing her things with her. Didn't care. She would get a job and be able to provide herself and the baby with the essentials. The main thing was to get out of this captivity. The cab driver shrugged his shoulders, saying he didn't care where he was taking her. and after a quarter of an hour, he stopped the car near the house where Sophia lived. Helen awkwardly got out of the cab. She had lost the gracefulness of her movements since the onset of her pregnancy. She still had to climb to the third floor, and her heart was racing like a hare's. There was a slight odor of Wendy's in the stairwell, and Helen was overcome with nostalgia. It had always smelled like this in here. Sophia's neighbor old lady, Wendy, had a great deal of respect for it and put it generously in all the closets and commands. Helen pressed the bell button, imagining that in a few seconds her friend would open the door for her, and they would throw themselves around each other's necks. But no one rushed to open it. In vain, Helen called again and again with a falling heart. The young woman realized that her friend was not at home. She must have gone to the store somewhere, but she would wait for Sophia. There was no other way out. Helen lost the bag and sank down on the steps. When she heard the front door open, she was alarmed. It could have been Sophia. A few moments later, she couldn't believe her eyes. Leah was coming up the stairs. "How did you find me?" she asked, barely audibly. "Honey, it was a test, and you didn't pass it. I had no doubt you would escape, though. And of course, I had no trouble guessing where. There's nowhere else to go. If you were smart, you'd get in a cab and go to your father's. But you're a poor, naive fool. Don't call Sophia. She's on vacation in the South, and I'm sure she's perfectly happy and doesn't think about you. And you knew she was away." Helen asked with just her lips. "Of course I knew. Otherwise, I wouldn't have offered you that walk. What kind of a bitch are you? Now let's go home," calmly, Leo continued. Not long before, Helen was contemplating when she would go into labor, whether it would be possible to keep from screaming, to shout in front of everyone. It seemed very embarrassing to her, but now she was exactly screaming help. Leo squeezed her hand tightly. "You want me to call the psychiatric team? I have a friend who works there. He's aware of the problem and will come faster than the police. If you expect her to be called by the neighbors, a psychiatrist will tell the cops you have a diagnosis, and a caring husband will drive you. So I suggest you don't embarrass yourself and make yourself look crazy in front of a lot of other people." With her head down, Helen followed her husband. The tide of emotions was too strong. She felt sick, barely able to stand on her feet. Leo's car was parked in the driveway. He loaded his wife into the back seat like a thing in a mirror. Helen saw his grin. She closed her eyes and didn't open them the whole way. She really felt no longer a human being as a person as before, but an object, belonging to a master. Helen had become depressed. Not only did she not do household chores, but she would not leave her room, lying all day long, turning her back to the wall and keeping silent when she had to get up to go to the restroom. She felt herself weakening quickly, and it was a pleasant sensation. Helen wanted to sink into oblivion as soon as possible and leave this world that way. And the last thing she wanted was for Leo to disturb her and talk to her. The day came when he came and put a chair next to her bed and sat down. "It won't go on like this," he said. "If you don't eat, you won't last long." Helen twitched and, without turning around, made it clear that she didn't care. "Now you're definitely mentally ill," Leo continued. "And if you don't do something about it, you're not going to get better." "Let me go," Helen said. "Come with me." She got out of bed, listless, like a marionette. She no longer believed her husband. Leo held her hand tightly as they went down the stairs and then down another one to the basement. Helen wondered if she had the strength to make it upstairs. After all, and this was indifferent to her, what did it matter where she lay? Might as well be on the floor in the hall. In the basement, Leo opened the very door that was usually closed, for which his old things were kept, as he had said. Now Helen saw that the room was completely empty. A cage. Now her husband held Helen by both hands and spoke to her like a child. "If you behave as you do now, I won't be able to leave you alone. You understand? In your condition, you could hurt yourself. There's plenty of opportunity for that up there in the house. And I can't let anything happen to you and the baby. You keep going. You'll be seen by a psychiatrist friend of mine, prescribed pills, and you'll live here with all the furniture. Mattress, night potty is fine. You had this torture chamber specially set up?" she asked. "No," I shrugged. It's not uncommon for mansions to have a secret room like this to hide in. If there's a break-in, a robbery, or some other emergency. This time it's my emergency. You're the one who wants to be medicated, so you'll lie there like a vegetable. Why do you need all this? Helen didn't realize she was going to ask that question herself. Neither did Leo expect it. He was silent for a few moments. Because you're mine, he finally said, when you and I got married, you're the only one I belong to. I've never thought of leaving you or changing you, but you're always tearing yourself apart. But I won't let you go. You promised, Leo. But 1 million people get divorced. Helen said tiredly, what makes you think our marriage is special? I think you're the one who's mentally ill, not me. Be that as it may, he replied, holding back his anger. Do you have to answer that question? Do you want to spend the time left before the birth in a human way? Or do you want to be locked up in here? Not humanly. It will be either way. Helen sighed. You know, I don't care. It's up to you. Okay, he said. We'll give you another chance. Well, have something to eat tonight. Let's go upstairs. And Leo helped his wife up the steps, overcome that she couldn't do it alone. Helen knew she had to wait for the birth, but she could not have imagined the shock that awaited her. The young woman had packed a bag in advance with things she might need at the hospital. If Leo wished to check on her, well, there were no secrets. Nightgowns, hygiene items, a few books. And yet, as Helen looked at that bag, it represented to her the hope that she would be able to get out of here soon. But when it was time to go to the hospital, Leo said, will you give birth at home, dear? Helen looked up, and there was pain in her eyes, as if he had hit her again. Yes, yes, her husband went on. The doctor is on his way. What is it that you don't like? In the old days, only the poor gave birth in maternity hospitals, and the rich had midwives. It was the order of the day, so I've organized this luxury for you. What kind of luxury is that? Helen bit her lip in pain. What about sterility? What if something goes wrong and you need an operation? There's no facilities at home. If there are problems, then we'll deal with them, Leo said nonchalantly. You're young, healthy. Everything should go as it should. To be honest, Helen soon didn't care who her doctor was. Whether sterility would be assured for the next few hours. She felt like she was dying. The pain was so intense that the paramedics who arrived had to give her anesthesia. Maybe they did it out of mercy? Or maybe Leo had insisted, not wanting his wife's screams to be heard on the street. Even though their house was on the edge of the woods, it was still the edge of the street. When Helen came to, she didn't immediately realize where she was. Nothing hurt. It was blissfully light. For a while, she thought she had returned to her childhood and was lying on her bed in her parents' house. Then her vision began to focus, and she saw a dark red that it took another effort to remember everything. Someone entered the room. Helen turned her head and saw Leo's face. His was as fearless and calm as ever, unbelievable. Who was born? Barely audible, she asked. We have a baby girl. Show her to me, Helen asked, and mentally added not at us, but at me. Then said Leo, I want you to show her to me. Helen's old stubbornness was definitely back. After all, it was me who gave birth to her. Now you get some sleep, and then I'll show her to you, Leo promised. Helen knew it was useless to ask, and she was in no condition to get up and leave to look for her daughter right now. She was very weak. As soon as she closed her eyes, she fell, either into sleep or unconsciousness. Leo did not deceive her when Helen woke up feeling better. Leo had brought her baby. Helen was afraid to hold her daughter in her arms, such a small, tiny newborn head. It required careful support. Is she all right? Helen asked, not noticing she was crying. She put her daughter to her breast. What did the doctors say? The girl is healthy. Let there be faith, Helen decided, gazing into the baby's face. She didn't need hope. It was something shaky and uncertain, driving happiness crazy. She needed a firm belief that they would both get out of this nightmare quest. Leo agreed nicely. There was no crib in the room, and as the newborn napped, Helen began to look around helplessly, where to put her. Let me carry the baby to her room. Leo held out his arms. I want her to live with me. Helen slowly. Okay, tomorrow we'll move the crib in here and move everything around. But you need to sleep well tonight so you won't be woken up by baby cries. You need to rest. Don't you realize I can hear her from any room?" But still Helen gave her husband the baby. And he was right. Her strength was so exhausted that she slept soundly and dreamlessly that night. When she woke up in the morning, she realized she could try to get up. Leo brought her breakfast: coffee, toast, jam, eggs. "Bring it, Emily," demanded Helen. And noticing the strange expression on his face, she threatened him, "Or I'll definitely go on a hunger strike." "Emily no longer lives in this house," he said. "What?" Helen's heart literally stopped. "Don't be so scared. She's still doing fine. Only she will live somewhere else and other people will take care of her. And if you want to see her someday, you don't do anything stupid. That's the surest way to keep you in line," he added with a chuckle. Helen looked at him with horror. "Are you a human being?" she asked, shocked. "And who is?" Was there a grin on his face? "You're just a crazy sadist. I understand that you are excited. There have been so many changes in your life yet, but I still control my behavior and my words. Unless you want to spend the rest of your life in an insane asylum. That's where you won't be seen, Emily." Her husband bowed slightly and left. From that day on, personal hell began for Helen. After a tantrum so violent she could have died or gone mad. There was a breakdown in her character. It was like she lost her will. She became submissive like a dog that wants to earn its master's approval. She now lived day by day, fulfilling all his wishes, so that on the first of every month he threw on her lap another picture of Emily. Here is the baby learning to lift her head, to roll over, to sit up. Here she was taking her first timid steps, stepping along the couch. Helen tried to understand where her daughter was, based on the surroundings. But only a white wall was in the photographer's field of vision, and this very worn cherry-colored couch. And of course, the baby. Helen had no doubt that it was her daughter, even though she had only seen the little girl once. It was undoubtedly her. Helen recognized Emily's face as her own. Same nose shape, slit, and eye color. Except that the girl's hair was blonde, like Leo's. From the outside, it might have seemed that Helen's situation was now better. She began to leave the house invariably in the company of her husband. But still now the two of them were seen in cafes, stores, 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 and parks. But Helen saw this freedom as a humiliation. If before she had nurtured in herself hatred for her husband and considered him crazy, now she was forced to pretend to be a happy wife. Leo had warned her if she tried the antics he said she would never see the baby again. And Helen knew her husband was capable of carrying out his threat, even if she managed to get to the police. And Leo would be apprehended. He just wouldn't reveal the secret where the girl was. How long would this torture last? Helen asked herself longingly. Would it ever end? Would her husband abuse her? A year, 2, 3, or a lifetime? Her psyche was teetering on the brink. Helen was afraid that such a life would make her lose her mind. Now she was bound to Leo much more firmly than before by the word, and hoped to see her daughter someday. She and Leo got into the habit of stopping by the supermarket on Saturday nights and buying groceries for the week. One time, Helen was selecting an item in the dairy department, and Leo walked a little farther to pull a bottle of wine off the shelves. The unfamiliar young man quickly passed the young woman, but also dropped a carton of milk into her cart. Helen opened her mouth in surprise at first, then saw Sophia in the back of the store in the distance, making a hand sign to her. Everything was going as it should. Helen nodded involuntarily. They were not allowed to approach each other. Leo would stop it immediately, and there was no telling what Helen's punishment would be. Maybe he would lock her in the basement or beat her up again. He often raised his hand to her. Helen was used to enduring the pain. She didn't scream or cry now. She only flinched like a dog being kicked by a cruel master. When she and Leo arrived home, the first thing Helen did was look at the milk carton, and her pencil had written, "Your father is dying. No hope calling to say goodbye." And then all the skills Helen had recently acquired went out the window. She rushed to her husband. "I have to go home," she begged. He raised his eyebrows. "Why? Is father dying? I haven't seen him in years. I can never forgive myself if I don't say goodbye to him. You're not the ultimate monster. Let me go for a few days and I'll be back. I swear to you, or let's go together." He grabbed her chin. "How do you know about your father? Tell me," she blurted it out. It was the first thing that popped into her head. "I met a friend at the store." She said, "Don't lie." He didn't believe it for a second. "First of all, you weren't talking to anyone there. Secondly, if someone had told you about your father, you'd have told me right away. And you only found out about it now. Someone handed you the phone, wrote you a note. Tell me." Helen didn't see any other choice but to lay it on the line, did she? Maybe then he'd take pity and let her go to her father. She showed him the ill-fated box. "I see," he squinted. "You're not going anywhere. Father can die just fine without you. Leo, for God's sake." Helen knelt in front of her husband. "You realize you'll do a terrible thing if you don't let me go. Fate can forgive a lot of things, but it punishes for such things. The boomerang will come and it'll be interesting to watch." His tone hasn't even changed. It was just as cold and mocking. "And for being so eager to deceive me. Next month, there will be no pictures of you with Helen had a terrible tantrum in her memory." She sobbed for hours locked in her room. And when she did want to come out, she realized that Leo's intention was not to let her out anytime soon. She spent about a week alone. It was good that the bedroom was connected to the bathroom. At least Helen was not thirsty. Her husband didn't bring her any food. It was a real prison. There were bars on the windows to keep out burglars. The view was of a high fence with a forest beyond. Helen didn't know when she would be released, but when Leo got the call to report that her father had died, her husband purposely came to the door so she could hear his voice. Leo expressed his condolences and said that unfortunately he and Helen could not make it to the funeral. Very busy with work. Well, as soon as they have a moment to spare, they'll come and look at it. It seemed like a week. Helen felt that her mind was tormented, and she could not tell exactly how many days had passed when Leo opened the door, could go downstairs and eat something. After that, Helen finally broke down. She became apolitical and indifferent to everything. She didn't care whether she stayed at home or followed her husband, and wherever he led her, keeping her head down. She did her homework, but she did it thorough as an automaton. When the housework was finished, she would sit or lie motionless, looking at one point. You couldn't tell whether she was immersed in her thoughts or in prostration. When Leo spoke to her, she answered him, but she answered the question. It was impossible to get a word out of her now. The question remained, why would he want such a broken doll? But it was as if he was satisfied that he had brought her to such a state that she walked like a mannequin without feelings, thoughts, and desires. That he had complete power over her. Something human appeared in Helen's gaze only when her husband placed another photograph of his daughter in front of her. She would stare at her for a long time, and the expression in her eyes would become sad, as if she were mentally talking to Emily. Then she put the pictures in the album and put it in someone's drawer. She knew that if she kept pulling out and looking at the pictures, Leo would throw the album away. Just like he destroyed everything she cared about, so she would pick up the album once a month just to put another picture in it. And so the years went by. One day, in a conversation between the couple, the number 18 came up. When Emily turns 18, I'll tell you. And then she'll decide for herself if she wants to see you. And if she does, I won't object. Helen decided to think of this day as the tipping point of her imprisonment, after which she would either have her freedom and her daughter, or she would be gone. Now she knew that it was possible not to make any effort for this not to take any sin on her soul. She would leave simply out of longing and despair. In the last month before that date, she knitted a beautiful blue shawl. It had once been her favorite color, and she hoped her daughter would like it. On the cherished day, she gave Leo the shawl package, asking him to give it to Emily for me. He grinned, but took the package. That day, he didn't come home for a long time. Helen had no doubt that he had gone to Faith. After all, she is his daughter after all, and celebrating her coming of age. When she heard the house gate open in the evening, she ran downstairs. "Well?" she asked. He could have taunted her by demanding, for example, that she serve him dinner first. But Leo would not do that. He handed her the package. "Emily doesn't want to know you." "Why not?" Helen whispered with just her lips. "Did you tell her what you did to me? And I told her you left her. And now you're sorry and you want to make amends. I never said a word to her about you before." Helen herself did not expect what would happen. Then she threw herself at her husband, forgetting everything. She beat him with her fists ineptly and desperately, and screamed like a man who had been hurt intolerably and painfully. Leo was so unaware of this that after only a few seconds he came to his senses, and twisted his wife, and dragged her down to the basement. Helen was lying on the floor. It was very difficult for her to move. She didn't even want to raise her head, not even to turn it. The only thing the woman wanted was for everything to end here and now. She knew that Leo had locked the door from the outside. Or rather, there was an English lock. Her husband pushed her inside and slammed the door shut. Sooner or later he would open it or he wouldn't. It was all the same. When Helen tried to pull herself up, her head fell helplessly to the floor and her broken nose bled again. But Leo had never beaten her to the point of mutilating her. One has to think now, too. Nothing was fixable. It hadn't happened. Just a cruel lesson. After a while, she'd be able to walk again like she used to. But things happened differently than Helen had envisioned. When the door swung open and Leo saw his wife, he even apparently thought he had overdone it. He walked over to her and bent over. Later, Helen felt as if it was not she who had acted, but some force. Instead, she tore at her husband's leg, in a sudden, sharp movement. And when he lost his balance for a few moments, she jumped up and dashed for the door. Only when the lock clicked behind her back, her tormentor still inside, did she catch her breath. Helen heard her husband banging on the door and shouting something. But she also knew that the door was tight and secure. Not something even a man could just kick down. Nevertheless, she couldn't allow herself to gather herself quietly. Acting quickly, she frantically changed into jeans and a thin sweater. She threw on a jacket, shoved a few changes of underwear and the essentials into her bag. She knew where the money and her husband's card were. She didn't need to cover her tracks. On the contrary, she wanted Leo to be punished. The money, the files. Everything seemed to be in place. An ordered cab pulled up. Helen gave her friend's address. If she wasn't at home, she should go to the hospital. We weren't home. She aghast when she saw Helen with her bat on the doorstep. The friends hugged and cried, and could not unclasp the embrace. Then Sophia oiled the abrasions. Helen applied ice to the biggest bruise. She made a sandwich and a cup of strong coffee. She wanted to pour brandy, but Helen stopped her. "No, don't. First, you have to go to the hospital to get the bruises removed, and then to the police." That's what the friends did. Sophia didn't leave Helen alone. She held her hand. Helen felt like Leo was about to appear behind her, calling out to her. Right on top of him, she heard his voice and picked herself up time after time. Again, there was no way for him to get out of the secret room by himself. Helen had finished telling her story to Alex, and now sat looking at the sea. "What happened next?" he asked, silently. Next, the police came to Leo's house. He was released from his confinement and immediately detained. There was a trial. He got less time than I expected, only 2 years. That is, he was given more, but released after 2 years. When I found out about it, I immediately left town to come here. I'll have to go back soon. How have you been living all this time? Turns out my father left me a nice inheritance. And I also found out that Leo had deposited a large sum of money into my account. So money was no problem. That's good, because I couldn't work for a while. I was in treatment. I was very close to losing my mind. Maybe that's why they gave Leo a little bit of a pass. They thought I was crazy and that I was talking about him a lot. The beatings really couldn't be hidden. And your daughter? My ex-husband never said where she was. Not with the police, not in court. Helen shook her head, so I don't know anything. Wasn't he charged with kidnapping? He made it look like there was no baby, Helen said. There wasn't. And it's all in my sick imagination. It's a miracle that thanks to the testimony of Sophia and other people I know it was possible to prove that he deprived me of my freedom. Why was he released so early? Alex was trying to figure it out. It doesn't make sense. I bought an apartment, said Helen. I had to have somewhere to live. But now I don't know how I'm going to get back. He'll be walking the streets of the same city. He won't leave me alone. I think he's got some kind of obsession with me. Don't you want to move? Asked Alex to another city. Start from scratch again. A naked man on bare ground. I don't have the strength for that. My father died with my stepmother and my siblings. I don't keep in touch. I only have a few girlfriends and now I will be forced to leave them. But when I found out he was released, I became panicky, afraid to come home, to go into an empty apartment. I feel like they're waiting for me there, waiting for the door to open, for him to come out. When do you have to go back? Asked Alex. In 3 days, answered Helen. Alex's decision to move in with Helen was met by the young man's parents in a flurry. I didn't think I would live to see this, said the mother, making me remember scenes from novels. You realize that after this, no one will respect you. Getting involved with a woman 20 years older than you. Mom, how many times have I told you I'm not having an affair with Helen? Alex wasn't so hot-headed anymore. He said those words in a tired tone. She just needs help right now. Who are you trying to fool? She's a rich woman. She can hire any help she wants, not ask a student who has no extra time. We have to learn. Even if we believed you, no one will. You be labeled as someone who can be bought. And no decent girl. Maybe it's my problem finding girls. Alex was starting to get hot. You've already found one, my mother parried. That lady should retire soon. I understand her desire to find a young boy. Alex was packing his things, trying to control himself. Stop it. Father turned to his mother. You are going to agree that Alex will not come to us. Do you understand him? Yes, man to man, mother couldn't calm down. This Helen is my age. Let me get another student instead of you. What would you say then? The father switched to his son. If you don't want to live with us, maybe just rent an apartment. We'll help you pay for it. A lot of guys your age are living with girls. Why do you have such a strange choice? Are you going to drop out? Alex was already standing in the doorway. I'll drop out if everyone needs me while I'm in. He found it easier to breathe outside. Helen lived in a new house in the heart of the city. It overlooked a square. You could admire the fountains. Sitting on the loggia with a cup of coffee. Alex, the university was a short walk from here. Walking distance. He could be grateful to Helen for a separate room with its own balcony and all the furnishings of his dwelling. Not at all comparable to his parents' modest apartment. But he could see that she needed him more than she was letting on about it. Helen stayed out of his life completely, but she cared. Alex took a sabbatical and got a job. In the morning, when he was about to leave, she would make him coffee and make him something to eat, even though he asked her not to worry and not to get up so early. She would sit against him in the kitchen, watching him eat and smiling slightly. If he didn't speak himself, she was silent with her. But it was surprisingly easy to keep silent with Helen, as if we were on the same wavelength. He came rather late. When the fall came, it was already beginning to get dark. And again, they would sit together at the table. And there was Helen's incomparable coffee in small cups. And Alex more words from the left in the evening, often humorously told about how his day went. There was nothing to tell about Helen, except about books read and movies watched. But Alex noticed that she became calmer around him. Her face rounded a little. She lost her painful thinness. Her hair began to grow. Helen went to the hairdresser, made a hairstyle that suited her more than before. She even found a hobby. She started growing flowers. By the time she became a winter girl, the apartment was like a winter garden. I guess it was the earth that had drawn her to the land as she got older. Helen shrugged his shoulders. Returning, Alex often saw such a picture. Helen sits in an armchair, as if in a green thunderstorm of branches beating all over. Softly speaking sconces, and the woman is reading a book. Alex involuntarily noted that the woman remained beautiful, despite all that she had been through. If I ever get married, I would like such a mother-in-law. He thought, feeling that Helen gradually becomes for him a native person. But sometimes, when he woke up in the middle of the night, he saw a light in the kitchen. And that means that Helen again had a terrible dream, in which the door quietly opens and her ex-husband enters. And now until morning, she will sit, drink coffee, and listen. Would there be footsteps on the stairs? She realized that these were far-fetched fears, but she couldn't help it. From Leo's house, Helen had taken nothing with her except her personal belongings, a photo album, and a blue shawl she had knitted for her daughter. The shawl now hung in her room. Alex did not hide from her that he was trying to find her husband and daughter. But he didn't tell her the details. And when the young man disappeared for days at a time, Helen knew it had something to do with the search, but she never questioned it. It was too painful and intolerable for her to hope and then be disappointed. And so the year passed. Helen wanted to talk to Alex about his plans for the summer. She herself wanted to go somewhere to the north, maybe to Karelia. She couldn't stand the heat, and she thought if the young man wanted to, he could accompany her. If he has a girlfriend, let him take her with him. She's paying for the young people's room. Alex's presence gave her a semblance of family, but she didn't have time to talk about it. The day came when Alex knocked on her room. "I need to talk to you." Helen looked up with frightened eyes. "Did you find out something bad?" "Leo found me. We have to leave. Will you let me sit down?" Settled across from Helen in the chair, Alex began to speak. "I found out why your ex-husband was released. Of course, not only in connection with it, but this circumstance also played a big role. Leo went blind." As Helen asked in a whisper. "There, when he was serving time, there was a fight in the zone. He got beat up pretty bad. Concussion and blindness. He was in the hospital for a long time, and he'll never see again. The doctors are sure he won't. But I wondered what he was. Why did he treat you like that? Because by the time you were married, he was already a wealthy, well-to-do man. And Emily, did you find out anything about Emily?" Helen interrupted. "Wait a minute. I was sure this behavior was more typical of someone from a marginalized background. But when I delved into all of this, he really had a rough childhood. After his father left, the family lived in blatant poverty. An old house, and there wasn't even heating with a stove and wood. The mother, whom Leo loved very much, began to drink first and then reached for other men. She would leave the house and spend the night somewhere. And the boy was left alone in the fuel rooms, sleeping in his jacket when she returned drunk, and often with some lonely woman bragging to her son about a new ring and a new dress. Leo asked Mom, "Why did you leave me for someone else?" "You have your whole life ahead of you," she said. "Mine is passing, and you can't give me anything right now, so don't judge me for taking from others." Maybe that's what gave him the incentive to get ahead at all costs and become a wealthy man. It was an attempt to prove something to his mother, but it failed. When Leo started earning well, his mother was already dead. A life of excess is no good. And when he met you, all his childhood complexes were realized. His mother didn't belong to him. She was always slipping away from him, swapping him for someone else. So he decided to make you all his, at any cost. At first, he thought you'd be his child. But then he realized you could leave with a baby in your arms. That's when he separated you and your daughter. He knew there was no better blackmail than a daughter. He may or may not give her back to you. And as long as he has the daughter, you'll be at his mercy. Then why did he take my hope away? He said Emily didn't want to hear from me. Alex shrugged. Maybe he was tired of playing this game for so many years. Maybe he just snapped. But he wasn't going to let you go for sure. In your face, he was definitely avenging his mother for his childhood. Where he hid his faith. That's what tormented Helen. Most of all, she's alive. He gave her to strangers to be adopted. Do you know anything about that? I know. Alex was silent for a few moments, and the woman held her breath. You have no idea who raised her. Who did? Your stepmother. He brought her the little girl and assured her that you had given her up. He's too busy with work to raise a girl. Maria really did love your father. Her own sons were grown, and she realized she couldn't give the professor's own granddaughter to an orphanage. So she raised Emily. Leo visited the girl, took pictures. Helen held her hand to her throat. She really hates me and doesn't want to know. She's at Maria's now. Come with me. Alex suggested it. I have something to show you. And I also want you to know this. I met with Vera and talked to her. Helen had long ago given the young man the keys to her car, and now the car was waiting for them at the entrance. From excitement, the woman did not realize where they were going. The city ended, the villages went on. Then the road turned into the forest. Finally, Alex stopped the car and shocked. Helen recognized the place where she and her husband had once spent their honeymoon. The cottage by the lake. It had recently rained and the air was filled with the smell of pine needles, earth, and leaves. There was a small pier next to the cottages. It was empty now. It seemed that there was not a single living soul here, but it only seemed so. Helen did not immediately see on the landing in front of the cottages in a chair sat a man from the worst with gray hair and dark glasses. Helen would not have recognized Leo, but reason told her that it was him. And standing next to him, leaning toward him, was a girl. She was saying something to the old man, stroking his arm. Then the girl threw her head down. She was as fair-haired as her mother. And with her noble features, she resembled her grandfather. For a minute, she and Helen looked back at each other. Helen wanted to walk toward Faith, but realized she couldn't move. Her legs were failing. Alex, apparently sensing her condition, took her firmly under the elbow. "You are not angry that I decided to treat a little?" he asked quietly. Helen did not immediately realize what he was talking about. Emily said something to her father and slowly walked towards them. The closer the girl came, the more Helen's doubts grew. No tests were needed here, no questions asked. This was her baby girl, the one she had given birth to and held in her arms only once in her life. About 10 paces away, Emily stopped. And only now Helen noticed that on the girl's shoulders lay a blue fishnet bundle. The handkerchief was the same one that had hung in Helen's room a while ago, and looking at which she believed that she would give it to her daughter someday.
Subscribe and click the bell. Miranda dreamed of her only son having a rich life. She herself raised him alone, working 3 jobs to support him adequately. She had always thought that the more she invested in him, the greater the return. No one had ever canceled old age, and she didn't want to grow old in poverty. Here, graduated from the institute, Mom will try to find you a decent job. And there, and the bride you fall. Mom, what kind of bride? Besides, you know I love Lisa, and we're planning to marry her. Don't be silly, Lisa. I don't want you to live like your father and me. He couldn't stand the poverty and he drank himself to death. Well, that's where he belongs. He's always been a weakling. You're a strong boy. So I'm asking you to take a more realistic view of life and not get down on yourself. I'll find you a rich bride. I'll do anything for that. By the way, I've already found you a job. It's a very big firm. Robert, you've probably heard of him. He's got branches all over the country. He's a very rich man with a daughter. She's handicapped. She was in a car accident with her mother when she was a kid. Her mother died, but her daughter survived, crippled. But that's okay. This is your chance, son. You don't have much time left to study. So right after the institute, you'll arrange everything there. Your job is to please the management. And then we'll get closer to our daughter. Mom, are you serious? Is that how you want me to live with a cripple? You think it's wrong not to live with a cripple, but to become a rich man. Believe me, this Robert would do anything for his daughter. He loves her very much and will do anything to make her happy. And he'll raise you up so you won't need anything. And I'll be by your side as always. I'll help you with advice if you need it. And your Lisa won't go anywhere. She'll be waiting. Besides, you can do anything for her. You'll buy her an apartment. And you'll go out with her. Or we'll think of something else. Stephen didn't really like Mom's plan. He planned that right after the institute, he and Lisa would start living together, rent an apartment, get a job, and then we would get married. But Mom, as always, decided everything in her own way. Lisa, my mom got me a job at a very big firm. Anyway, so far, our plans are a little off. Couldn't your mom get me a job too? I want to make good money too. I don't know, I'll talk to her. She's the one who made a deal with someone she knows, and she said she'd do her best. Well, you're my mother. You know, I know a lot of people, so she made a deal. Well, I'll be sure to ask about you. I'd love to work together. I'd always have you in my sights. You know how much I love you. I'd like that too. But I think your mom's got other plans that I can't get into. You know my mom. She wants what's best for me. But don't worry. We'll always be together. You'll see. I believe you. I just don't think it's going to be the same. Your mom is nice to me, but I can see she wouldn't want me to be your wife. A woman can sense that. No matter what I do, she doesn't like it. So I don't think we'll be together. Stephen was silent, but he realized he was wrong. His mom has completely different plans, and she really wants her son to become a rich man. She always told him as a child that when he grows up, she will do everything to ensure that they do not need anything. In fact, he didn't mind it himself. Didn't a rich life ever hurt anyone? Miranda met up again with her friend whom she had known for a long time. So, Sashenka, is there a place for my son at Robert's company? Miranda, I told you I'll do everything. Your son will work there. You can count on me. Of course, the position is modest, and the salary is small. But you understand, no one will hire him for a good job right away. And if he is clever, and I hope that your son is like you, he will not stay long in this place. He will quickly climb the ladder. Stephen, I think he'll do the right thing. He's a capable and intelligent boy. Listen, Miranda, as far as I know, you've known the Robert family for a long time. I heard he has a daughter with a disability. Yeah, it's a terrible tragedy. Only one daughter left alive. I don't know what happened there. I came to work there when it happened. You know, the kind of people they try not to talk about. But Robert adores his daughter, dusts her off. Kelly herself is a good girl, modest, kind, smart. She's graduating from college too. And most likely, will ask her father to take her to his work. She's cool about the fact that she can't walk. She uses a wheelchair. I mean, what's the big deal? She's got security around her all the time. So they help her, and there's no problem. As far as I know, her father didn't want her out of the house at all. He was afraid she'd be laughed at. You know how cruel young people are these days. But she insisted. And she made friends. In general, the girl lives like all of us. In fact, how else? With that kind of money and a colleague, you can live in peace, not like ordinary people. I understand, Miranda. There are so many different prosthetics nowadays. You see, she can actually get back on her feet. Plus, with their money, I don't think it'll be a problem. That's the thing. She can't have prosthetics. After the accident, she has serious problems with her body, with her heart. Trouble and stress is contraindicated. They've already checked everything. They've been everywhere, even to Germany. But everywhere the doctors said that she can't stand on prostheses. Her heart can't take it. Poor girl, so unlucky. She's not poor. Believe me, she's doing fine. Unlike you and me, even though we're healthy people, some people are lucky to be born with a golden spoon in their mouth. In our country, you have to work like hell to keep from starving. And if, God forbid, you get sick, it's a nightmare. There's not enough money for anything. Why are you so angry today? My Cindy happens to be asking for a new cell phone. Do you know how much it costs? So we had a fight about it. I'm raising her just like you raised your son. Where do I get that kind of money? I'm lucky with him in that sense. I've been explaining to him since he was a kid about the war and how hard it is for me. So he never asked me for anything. I guess you didn't talk to Cindy, and now she's all grown up and thinks you don't give her enough. So tell her to go to work, and she can buy her own cell phones. That's easy for you to say. She's a student of mine. How can I send her to work? I put up with it. She's doing the best she can. Sometimes I just don't have the strength. I understand. It's always like that with kids. It's okay. She's an adult. She'll soon realize everything, and better yet, she'll marry a rich man, and she won't know your dinner, and you won't be left out of pocket. You know what I mean? Oh, if only it were that simple. Don't be ridiculous. Cindy, you've got a girl with a college education. It's all in your hands. Besides, you know rich people. I never thought of that until now. I don't understand. Take her to different receptions, and she'll be noticed. Miranda left her friend satisfied with the result. She had learned everything she wanted for her son. For his sake, she would do anything. Her boy shouldn't need anything. He'd had enough bad luck in life, but now they'll be fine. The main thing now was that he should graduate. Kelly was sitting in her room as usual, reading a book. She had heard that her father was back from work, but he hadn't come to her room yet, so he was still busy. As soon as he is free, then they will definitely have dinner together like they always do. True, she had a serious talk with her father tonight, even though he was always trying to avoid it. Today she was determined to talk to him. As time went on, her father didn't show up, so she decided to go downstairs herself to ask him when they would have dinner. Everything in their house had been made for her, so that she could be in the rooms unobstructed and move about quietly, somewhere to pray. She found her father in the study, sitting at his computer, writing something. "Hi, I thought you'd forgotten about me. Turns out you're still working." "I am, daughter. My analytics department's all pissed off. They fired the hell out of everyone. They don't check at all. It's terrible what I pay their salaries for. I have to double-check everything in the field myself. Can I see it?" "Sure, come here." Kelly rode up in her wheelchair, looked in her father's computer. It was a mess. She immediately told him where it needed fixing first thing. And then she looked at her father with a satisfied look. "Dad, I've told you several times, let me help you. Besides, I like it myself. Take me to you after the institute, and believe me, you will never have problems with the analytical department again." "I see, Kelly. I just wanted to save myself the trouble. You're a smart girl, and everything I'm doing right now is for you. I actually wanted to send you overseas to get some rest. Travel for work. You'll have time for that. But I'm watching you run things now. I feel like I need your help more than ever. I'm really glad you finally realized that. Now let's go to dinner. Not too hungry. They've been waiting for you for a long time. Come on, we're good. I'm pretty hungry myself, but you saw it. I had to figure out what they'd done to me. Dad, they don't check your data at all. That's a big mistake in analytics, but I already realized that. Then you're gonna take over the department because I've got enough work to do. I'll send the data to your laptop for now, but when you graduate, you come straight to me. I'll even set up an office for you. I'll even have an office set up for you." Okay, Dad, now go to the kitchen. Or our Aunt Clara will be nagging again, because dinner is probably already cold. You're right, that's how our Aunt Clara is. It's best not to mess with her. But I think you stood up for your father, because I'm the one who's going to get the blame. Good, I have a way with her. I know how to calm down our angry Aunt Clara. What about us? You'll see." They walked to the living room, where the table had long since been set. For as long as Kelly could remember, they always ate dinner in the living room. It was their family's custom. In fact, she had nothing against it. "We're waiting for dinner," shouted the father, and looked at his daughter cheerfully. Soon, Slaga came in, grumbling that she had cooked everything a long time ago. Everything had cooled down long ago, and she didn't get up to reheat her masterpieces 20 times. "It's all your fault, Robert. Your job comes first. What am I supposed to do? I work hard. I cook, and you don't care about my labor. You're about to have a warming meal. You're pretty tasty. I'm always talking about what I've been pulling. This time I held up my dad, but I proved to him that in his job I'm indispensable. He's agreed to let me run his analytics department. So you can be happy for me. Kelly, so you're gonna work with your dad now, just like you wanted. Oh, that's great. Now, without further ado, let's eat dinner. Let's make sure everyone eats. I worked so hard tonight. I think it's delicious. You always make everything delicious. I promise my daughter, and I won't be late for dinner like this again. Okay, I believe you. Kelly, if you say it, it means it. The father looked meaningfully at his daughter, and she smiled her beautiful smile. How much like her mom was she? Especially when she smiled like that. How are things going at the institute? You're not seeing anyone. I've just noticed you've been different lately. Did something happen to you? No, I'm fine. I just really wanted to work for you, you know. I'm almost done with school. And then it just felt like there was no point. And then you were always against me working with you. I was really depressed about it. And I felt like you didn't need me. Don't be silly. But how could I not need you? I just wanted you to get some rest. Well, I've explained. But if my daughter wants to work, I'm happy to do it. So don't worry, it's fine. While you're still getting things done, like I said, I'll get your office ready so you're comfortable, but you're welcome there. I look forward to seeing you with great pleasure. Robert was pleased. He saw that he couldn't do without his daughter's help, but I didn't think his daughter would want to work for his company. After all, she's disabled. He was always afraid for her. It was especially scary to see how people looked at her with some pity, some anger. And his heart always jumped out in anger. But now he saw that his daughter had grown up, that she herself perfectly coped with all the hardships. And the fact that she is constantly in a wheelchair does not bother her at all. Besides, as she recently told him that the strength is not in the legs, but in the head, she's right. The next day, he gave the order to prepare the office next to his office. Many people began to murmur, realizing that he was doing all this for his daughter. Robert's secretary at lunchtime told her friends in HR in confidence, "Now we're gonna have a handicapped person working with us. Her daddy's going to arrange everything for her. Why do we need her here to feel sorry for her?" You shouldn't say that, Vika. Kelly is a beautiful girl, and she's very smart. So enough with the slander and the talk. You better get on with your business. Besides, if your boss finds out, you won't last long. He adores his daughter. It's not her fault. What happened? It's nobody's fault. Besides, the girl grew up without her mother, who died in that unfortunate accident. So why feel sorry for her? She has everything. They don't need anything. Besides, she's used to it. She's probably a rich girl with a daddy like that. Plus, she's handicapped. I imagine Anna's all out of sorts and said, "Stop talking, and then you're on your own. If you don't stop talking, you'll be out of a job." You got me. Kelly sat on the porch of the institute, waiting for her friend Christina. They had been friends since first grade. She told her father about her then. He, of course, made inquiries, said that her friend's family was good, that her father was an engineer and her mother was a pediatrician. Christina's father was having a little trouble at work at the time, and Robert helped him. This brought the two girls very close together, and they were now going out together all the time. Kelly also wanted her father to take her friend to work with him, but she didn't know how to convince him. "Kelly, you've been waiting a long time." "Sorry, I was just picking up my notes from Bobrov. I'm sick of taking them into eternity and then having to run after them. I need to get them back." "Why are you so happy? Did something happen?" "Yeah, I talked to my dad yesterday, and he wants me to work with him. I finally talked him into it. I haven't talked about me yet, but I think we'll find something for you." "Maybe you shouldn't, Kelly." "What? What if I can't handle it? And there's a lot of things we're grateful to you for. If it wasn't for you, I might have been expelled my sophomore year. You realize I'm weak in a lot of subjects. You're the smart one. I'm mediocre. My mom said it was a miracle I got in. I should have gone into teaching. That's my limit. Don't be silly. Your mom can be wrong sometimes. She's a doctor, but she doesn't believe in you. And that's her fault. Okay, Christina, let's go home. Aunt Clara's baking fascinated today. She told me to make sure you came. And I'd love to. But my mom's gonna be mad again. She always does. When I praise Aunt Clara's food, she starts nagging, saying that, of course, If she had as much time as your nut, she'd make a masterpiece. But Dad and I know our mom can't cook at all. I see you guys are having fun. I think if my mom were alive, we'd have the same thing. Kelly, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I mean, I'm telling you about my family, and you're sad. But I'm not being mean. I know it's okay. It's just something I said. Did you go to Christopher, the driver? He's waiting for us. Listen, Kelly, this Christopher of yours, he's single. I keep meaning to ask you, but I keep forgetting. He's not. Why do you want to know? Do you like him? I like him a lot. I like guys like that a lot. I mean, look at him, like he's on the cover of a magazine. I didn't know you liked guys like that. Do you want me to introduce you guys to him? Oh no, that's okay. Wouldn't you look at someone like me? You're being modest again. Chidge. Christina, you knew you had very low self-esteem. You can't do that. You need to rethink that. They got in the car and drove to Kelly's house. Christopher, then only Christina needs a ride back home. She lives far away. That way we can study for exams together. Study late. What do you say, Kelly? I'll do it. I'll drive her. Does he call you by your middle name? Did Christina giggle? That's what Daddy requires. The girls didn't speak again on the road. Kelly thought about what Christina had told her. She didn't know how to introduce her to Christopher, and thought that her friend would probably have a chance at that when he took her back home. It was just that Kelly herself had never had a boyfriend, and she didn't know how to get acquainted at all. She decided for herself that she was going to be alone, because she really realized that no healthy guy would want to be crippled. There were certainly some guys at the Institute who picked on her, but she could see that their interest was not in her, but rather in her father. Miranda glanced at the time and frowned. The whole sun was late again, and she understood the reason why he was with his girlfriend Lisa again, and what he found in her that he just couldn't break up. It's not right. It's not his time. It was a shame that no matter how she explained it to her son, he didn't listen to her at all. Once again, he should have been home long ago, but he was still gone. Finally, she heard the front door slam. The son threw his keys on the nightstand and started to develop. Hi, Mom. Why are you so glum? And you're still asking? We agreed with you that you after the Institute immediately go home. But I see you don't care about my requests. You were with your Lisa again. Mom, I told you that I love her and that she's the girl I want. I thought you agreed with me. And we agreed that I would do whatever you told me to do. But she would always be there for me. You understand, son, the minute you start courting Kelly, her father's gonna start making inquiries about you. He's gonna find out everything. And that's where we're gonna get in the way. So think again. Talk to her and tell her that you need to break up for a while, but she has to understand. Okay, Mom, I'll talk to her. But you realize it's not as simple as telling her I have to marry another woman. How can I tell her it's all about the money? She wouldn't understand. She'll understand perfectly well. I've seen her, and I know this type of person. She'll do anything for money. So you can tell her. You'll see she'll agree to anything. Just don't tell her the truth. You can't trust women. Just say that you have to hit on a rich girl just to get a good position. Because if you tell the truth, everything will fall apart. Robert will be reported immediately, and we'll be left with a broken trough. And do you realize then that we'll lose time? Smart boy, and not only smart, but very handsome. So I think you can do it. The important thing is that Lisa doesn't get in your way. So weigh everything and think about what's more important to you. And also think that you're going to have a lot of Lisas. There was no Stephen. What to say to his mother? He himself had long dreamed of having a car. He liked the branded things he saw in the store that were out of his reach. Besides, who doesn't want to live rich? Even if it means marrying a coworker. Mom's so sure this girl will even want to talk to him. What if she has a boyfriend? What if she's happy? Here I am with my suggestions. I checked. Son, he's single. But you're right, Kelly. The girl's very smart, so don't expect her to jump into your arms right away. You think it's that simple. No, my dear, you're gonna have to woo her. And you're gonna have to woo her hard. You know what I mean, because she's not going to throw herself at you right away without even thinking about it. So you're saying she might refuse me? Naturally, you're not as smart as I thought you'd be. You think if something's wrong with her, she should come running to you. No, she's been smartly provided for since she was a child, never denied anything. It comes up, you'll believe it, she won't even pay attention to you. It's all up to you. If you want her to fall in love with you, you'll do whatever it takes. Well, you know what I mean. Because I've done everything for you. Now it's your turn. And please don't upset me. He didn't see that coming. For some reason, in his fantasy, everything was so simple. He sees Kelly, she sees him, and she agrees to marry him. And then he goes back to living the life he wants. But it's not that simple. Like his mom just told him, he didn't say anything. He went to his room to think for a while. First of all, he decided to take a closer look at Kelly. His mother had told him about her a long time ago, but he always thought it was nothing. But his studies were coming to an end, and that meant his mother's plan had to be put into action. He opened his laptop to look at the pictures of Robert and Kelly. He was very surprised that she turned out to be quite a nice girl with a very beautiful and gentle smile. For some reason before, when he heard about her, he thought she must be very ugly. He looked online at her pictures and thought it wasn't all bad. She's pretty and seems very naive, so it wouldn't be hard for him to get to know her better. Plus, he'll know what she likes and how to approach her. Mom's right about Lisa. You have to break up with her for this kind of thing, so she doesn't screw things up later. He regretted telling her about her plans, but he was smart enough not to go into details, and he has to have a serious talk with her tomorrow. But he still needed an approach to her that he couldn't think of. He went to Lisa's page to admire his girlfriend. When he saw that she had pictures of their mutual friend John, he didn't like that very much. He decided that this would be the reason for their breakup. In the evening, when he sat down to have dinner with his mother, he saw that she was waiting for a response from him. I understand everything. Tomorrow I'm breaking up with Tanya. Believe me, everything you've done for me won't go to waste. So you can count on me. Thank you, son. I knew you were a smart boy. Believe me, I'm not getting any younger every year. And that's why I want to live a normal life, thinking you'll do well. The next day at the institute, a happy Lisa came up to Stephen to hug him and, as usual, then dip him on the cheek. But he dodged, grabbed her hand, and took her aside. Why didn't you tell me that when you talked to John? I realize we are friends, but I didn't think his picture would be on your social media page. Why didn't you tell me? So it's just a photo. Stephen, what's wrong with you? Would you like it if I had a picture of your friend? What would you say to me then? Stephen, but I didn't think it would make you so angry. I don't even remember when I had it there. But I felt awful yesterday when I saw it there. I also felt bad when I saw your heart emoticons. How do you explain that? That's how the press makes jokes before. You know, John. And believe me, I didn't even pay attention to it. I don't believe you. You're obviously enjoying this. So just so you know, I don't like it at all. You got me. They nodded anxiously, glancing at Stephen. He needed her to be completely oblivious to that recent conversation when he had told her that his mother wanted to get him a good job. Just at that moment, John walked up to them and playfully pinched Lisa's waist. It was just what was needed. Stephen looked at Lisa with a frown. He didn't say hello to his friend, but silently turned and walked away. He smiled to himself, realizing that it had turned out even better than he had intended. John caught up with him, grabbed his elbow, and said, "What are you doing, friend? I just did it without a second thought. Believe me, I would never come between you and Lisa." There she is crying. Why don't you explain what happened? I don't have to. So you stay out of it. Is that how you're raising her or what? Tell me honestly, are you my friend or not? Of course I'm your friend. I'm always there for you, and you know it. Now, Lisa cheated on me, and you'd better stay out of it. Got it. How did Lisa cheat on you? There's no such thing. What's the matter, Stephen? It's smudging. So let her suffer a little. It's good for her. Don't feel sorry for her. I'm afraid she's gonna turn on you. She's not as saintly as I thought she was. They change guys like gloves. I got proof. But I'm not gonna get involved in this mess. So you're just gonna have to take my word for it. I wasn't expecting that. All right. Well, whatever you say, I'm always on your side. How upset are you? What do you think? We've been together for so many years. It's a shame to know your girlfriend's not faithful to you. I'm right. It's not nice. Well, that's okay. I'm looking at the world in a more cheerful way. We'll graduate soon. We'll go to work, and everything will be fine. There will be more beautiful girls. I'm right. Stephen nodded, and they went to their classes. True, he felt a little bad at heart that he had done that to Lisa, but he had no other choice. Now he realized that his mother was right about many things, and he would have a lot of Lisas like that. And now he had to get ready to study. There wasn't much left. The first day of work at Robert and Stephen's company, he didn't expect such a big deal. Only now he realized how rich this man was. Very smart. Mom is right, of course. If he married Kelly, he would have everything. But he also realized that it wouldn't be so easy to marry Kelly. It's all in his head, as easy and simple as he thought it would be. Now he'd seen the seriousness of it, realized it wasn't that easy. Robert wouldn't give up his daughter. He would still have to fight for her, but he was not afraid of that, because he understood perfectly well that as soon as he became his son-in-law, all doors would open for him. That's exactly what he needed Mom to do. I didn't see that one coming, of course. Listen, thank you so much for getting me this job. I wouldn't have gotten a job there on my own. I'm thrilled. Now I know exactly what you mean. Well, Mom's got good advice. Listen to me carefully, son. It's all up to you now. Work hard to get noticed. Then another piece of good news. His daughter will work there too. I mean at this company. So that makes your job easier. But it's up to you. She'll be working there too. What's she gonna do? I don't know yet. A friend of mine told me today. The office is ready for her. I already know who she'll be working there. In the meantime, why don't you mind your own business? I hope it works out for you. It's working, really. Absorbed Stephen. He loved what he was doing. Plus, he was noticed as an excellent worker, and within 3 months he was promoted. Of course, not as big as he would have liked, but in 3 months to rise, even if only one step, it was already a result. You're good, son. You're a smart boy. I'm glad I raised a son like you. We're gonna make it. Did you find out about Kelly's? 'Cause I've been working there a long time, but I've never seen it. Have you ever seen Robert? No, not yet. He doesn't come into our offices there. And there's nothing for us to do in his office. So we're just going about our business. That's right. His daughter is with him all the time. So it's up to you. Boy, you try and you will succeed. And Stephen tried. He did everything he could to get one more step up to where the big money of the connection was, where he could finally feel like a more important person. Kelly arrived home, and the first thing she did was head to her father's office. She wanted to talk to him about her friend who would also like to get a job. Christina had called her in the evening and told her that her mom was sick, that she needed a large sum of money. But she can't do anything because where she works, the pay is very low, and she probably can't afford the medicine. Dad, I can come in. It's okay. No, daughter, you know you never bother me. I see something's wrong. Trouble at work. No, I'm fine there. It's something else. Remember Christina, who we've been friends with since college? Well, she's got family problems. I'd really like to help her, but I need money. A job or both. You can hear me out. So tell me. My aunt is very sick. She needs medicine. You know very well how expensive it all is. Christina and my father are working, but they don't have enough. They need treatment now. So I'm offering to help with money and work. She's a smart girl. Trust me, she can handle it. Let's help them, Dad. How can I say no to you? I'll talk to my deputy tomorrow. I think he'll take her in, get her a job. But don't worry about the money. I'll wire the money to her account. Just give me her card number and the amount. So don't worry about your mom. We'll help her." Kelly looked at her father with pride. She always liked how he was quick to solve problems. She had always dreamed that if she ever fell in love with a man, he would have to be like her father. "Thanks, Daddy. I'll call her right away." Kelly dialed Christina's number and was very happy when she answered right away. "So, send me your card number and the amount you need for your mom's treatment. Tomorrow come to our company and your father will give you a job there. Everything will be fine. Don't worry." "Well, it's not right. When I told you about this, I didn't mean for you to help me with money. Believe me, I'm not friends with you for money, but only because it's a very good person and a great friend. Christina, don't worry. I know how you feel about me. I know you're not friends with me because my last name is Robert. So why can't I help you? Just because I can. I think if you were me, you'd do the same thing. Wouldn't you?" "Thank you, Kelly. You're the most wonderful friend I've ever had on Cindy. I'll get my mother's meds today, and I'll come to your company tomorrow. Believe me, I will do everything I can not to let you down. I'll do my best." A new girl came to the company. Stephen looked at her with interest, and also thought that she wasn't bad with herself, and that he wouldn't mind hitting on her. But then a coworker whispered to him that this very girl, a close friend of Kelly, she's her friend. I never would have guessed that, because I always thought that people like Kelly had unusual friends. She's just a simple girl, and she's cute too. They've been together since college. I'm having some problems in my family. So Kelly hustled up, told her father to bring her here. Well, it's up to them, but be careful with her. And there's no guarantee she won't rat you out to her bosses. You know what I mean. She's on the outs with them. But Stephen had other plans, and he decided to put those plans into action. "Hi, my name's Stephen. I see you're new here. So if you have any problems, I'd love to help you out." "You would? It seems like nobody cares about anybody here. And they look at me like I'm an enemy of the people. To be honest with you, he doesn't really like people who come in through favors. We were told you were the prodigy of our boss's daughter. That's why you're being treated like this right away. If you're nice to everyone, you won't see it go away anytime soon." "Okay, thank you so much for explaining. Although Kelly did warn me that I would be treated this way at first. She's very smart. And when she says something, she's always right." "How long have you two been friends?" "We met in college and have been inseparable ever since. I'll never forget the first time I saw her. She was so confused, and no wonder. People really looked down on her, like they'd never seen a person in a wheelchair before in their life. I didn't know who she was then, and I just felt sorry for her. Well, how do you walk?" I drove her around. She was happy to accept my help. She's a lovely person. She doesn't look like the daughter of rich parents, and that's what I liked about her right away. She has a humanity that a lot of healthy people don't have. I read somewhere that disabled people are evil because they don't look like normal people, but Kelly proved otherwise. I've never met anyone so bright. Okay, I'm probably just repeating myself. It's just that I really do love her a lot. Now I have to get to work. If there's a problem, I know I can come to you, Stephen." Stephen nodded, went to his workstation. He was interested in their conversation. He was learning a lot about Kelly again. Although the fact that she was a kind and smart girl, he had heard many times before. When lunch came, Stephen stopped by Christina's to invite her in and in between to show her the dining room that was in the building. And it was made especially for the employees. The food there is excellent. I've never had food like this in a restaurant. Come on, I'll show you where it is. I'm sorry, Stephen, but I'm going up to Kelly's. She's so busy working sometimes, she forgets to eat, which, unfortunately, is not normal. So I'll try to get her to eat. If I do, I'll meet you in the cafeteria." Stephen left, and Christina folded neatly all the papers in order on the desk and went to Kelly. Her office was next to her father's. And in fact, the regular employees did not go up there unnecessarily. She knocked on the door and heard Kelly's voice. "Kelly, hi. It's me. Let's go win. I'm starving. Besides, I've been told about your canteen so much that if we don't go, I'll starve to death. It's in your office." "No, you don't want to do that." "Of course we're going. I just haven't been going alone. I'd love to go with you, my friend. Tell me about your new place. No one's hurting you. Everything's fine. Don't worry about me. Besides, you know I'll never let anyone hurt me. I can always stand up for myself. I met this guy. Well, actually, he came up to me, offered to help me, said that if I do not understand something, I can safely turn to him. He's very handsome, by the way. Let me show him to you. I'm glad you're doing well. And I'd be really happy if you could make something work with this guy." "Not a chance. Guys like them will never look at me. He'd rather look at you. Don't be silly. I've told you 100 times. You're a very pretty girl, so stop underestimating yourself." Stephen saw them as soon as they entered the dining room. Christina gestured Kelly over to the table in a familiar gesture. In doing so, she pushed back a chair to make her friend comfortable. The dining room became very quiet. Everyone looked only at Kelly. She, on the other hand, paid no attention to anyone. Stephen was also looking at her for the first time, and to give him credit, he liked her in person. She was really a very beautiful girl. Against her background, Christina looked like a pale moth. The friends were talking quietly about something, not paying attention to anyone. The waiter immediately ran up to him and immediately took the order. Christina was quietly telling Kelly something, and then she turned and looked at him with her big blue eyes. He realized that Christina must have been telling her about him at the moment. He smiled quietly and nodded. Kelly nodded back at him and looked away. Christina smiled and listened to what Kelly told her, then turned to Stephen and made an inviting gesture. Stephen didn't refuse. Every opportunity to get close to Kelly was important to him now. He grabbed his tray with his order and walked over to them. "Hello, Kelly Robert. It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Stephen, but I think Christina already told you that. You can just go ahead." "Kelly is a pleasure, Stephen, and I'm glad you didn't leave my friend alone. I know how newcomers are treated here, so thank you again for your support. Also, you didn't know who Christina was or who I was. That tells me you're a kind, sensitive person." Stephen didn't bother to tell Kelly that as soon as Christina walked into the office, he had already been told all about her. Why dissuade him? Besides, Kelly's praise was very nice to him. "It's nothing. I didn't do anything wrong. Besides, Alice is a girl of character, and as it seemed to me, she doesn't need help or protection." The dinner passed in a friendly atmosphere. They talked quietly. And then when they finished, they agreed that now only 3 people would have lunch. When they got home, Stephen joyfully approached his mother and told her that he had met Kelly today. "How? Really? How did that happen? We had a new girl over. Turns out it was a friend of hers, and she introduced Kelly to me in the cafeteria today. Well, more like she introduced me to her. Whatever, Mom. Now she recognized me. And I recognized her. I don't think there's any rush. But I'm gonna take it slow." "Wrong, son. Just take your time. All in good time. Remember, you're gonna make it. You better tell me how arrogant she is." "Come on, Mom. She's a normal girl. It's, you know, pretty cute. Not my type, of course, but I was actually pleasantly surprised. She's not a freak, and I think I can go after her now. There are some complications, though. She doesn't trust anyone, I think, because she realizes that she's handicapped and what a normal guy doesn't need. It's my job to prove to her that none of this is true, that it's just her speculation. I'm right. You're right, son. You're always right. Look at the situation. And most importantly, remember that you got to keep your eyes on her, thinking only of her, no other girls. I hope you didn't compliment that friend of hers, because I know you. She'll tell her Kelly, and then it's all gone." Don't worry, Mom, I did the right thing. I went over there just to help her. We had a conversation. Nothing too much. All I had with her was work. Besides, I didn't like her. She's kind of pale and not really my type either. So you don't have to worry too much about it. Good, son. I'm glad you're a smart kid. I hope the ice is finally breaking. In a little while, you'll be the most powerful man in the world. In fact, who do you want to be? But the key is patience. Stephen agreed with his mother. He would have to be very careful not to scare her off. But he knew he would succeed. It was not without reason that he had come to this for so long. Kelly was in her room. She had gone to bed early tonight because she was feeling a little under the weather. Not good with her for the first time. Her heart was cramping, and blood was spurting whether the hearth was the same or not. And it even seemed like she had a fever at first, but she knew her body well and saw that she didn't have a fever. What was happening to her? She didn't understand. This had never happened to her before, and it frightened her. The image of Stephen kept running through her mind. No matter what she did, he was always in her face. Had she fallen in love? No, it couldn't be. Not with her. They'd been talking for 2 months. Always the three of them. He, she, and Christina. True, in the evenings he wrote to her. They talked about different topics, and she realized that she was very interested in him, and as it seemed to her, he was interested in her. And yesterday he invited her to the park. She had been there a long time ago, as a child, when my father took me there. But she didn't like it there, because there were children looking at her, and she looked at them and envied the way they ran. Her father offered to take her for a ride too, but she refused. She didn't want everyone looking at her, and Stephen had offered to let her go. She didn't expect him to do that. Are you serious right now? Kelly, it sounds like I'm kidding. You're what? But you realize that I am. Kelly was going to say handicapped, but Stephen interrupted her. Oh, come on. This is the most beautiful girl in the world to me. You're beautiful, you're sweet, you're kind, you're very smart, and I really enjoy talking to you. So why can't I ask you out? And Kelly said yes. Her malaise must have been exacerbated by the fact that she was anxiously awaiting the results. Her father, as usual, never let anyone near his daughter. And if there were people near her, he would make inquiries about them. Kelly never said anything about the games, and if he did ask, she simply replied that they socialized as colleagues. She then told him that Christina had introduced them, and then when she was asked out and had to tell her father, because she couldn't just leave the house without him knowing. She remembers that then as a teenager she asked her father what was the purpose of this insurance. You see, daughter, I'm really worried about you, and I think you know that enough to understand what I'm doing. No, it's not enough for me. Remember when you once told me that we should always tell each other the truth? Well, now I see that you're lying to me. And then my father told me that the accident when her mom died and she became an invalid was faked. But he couldn't prove anything at the time. But after that, he guarded his daughter like the apple of his eye. So she had to tell her father about the date. He was surprised. He didn't say anything, just nodded. And she realized that Stephen would be scrutinizing. She resented that, of course. But on the other hand, she understood who they were, and she'd seen how people sometimes went crazy over money. She thought her father wouldn't come home this time, but she was glad when she heard the sound of a car pulling up. Soon he knocked on the door of her room. You're awake. I'm glad you waited for me, but don't keep me waiting. Can you please tell me what you found out about Stephen? Well, I didn't find out much. He has no father. His mother brought him up. He's never had a criminal record and has never been involved in anything bad. In general, a positive character, which, frankly, scares me a lot. But I guess the mom did her best. She didn't want her son to get involved in different stories. Actually, she did well, did the right thing. Studying at the institute, met with a girl, but then they broke up. As it turned out, he could not tolerate the fact that she cheated on him. But according to the girl, this never happened, and apparently she was slandered. At the moment works in my company, does not meet with anyone. Anyway, I've told you all about him in a nutshell. Enough. Kelly shrugged. What did she have to do with it? She be happy and don't know all that information about him. What do you think about all this, Dad? I'm allowed to go out with him. Do you want to? Kelly's daughter nodded and blushed. But I don't mind. He seems like a smart guy. He's good at his job. I think he might even get a promotion. He's young, but he's got a good head for the job. So you're not going alone. You'll have a guard with you. Got it. Who else is going? Christina and Stephen's friend. I think his name is John. I've got some information on his friend, but I don't think you're interested. By the way, he's been in a couple of bad situations, but it's no big deal. He seems like a regular guy to me, and I respect that kind of guy. I was like that myself when I was younger. But what about Stephen? I'm a little concerned, of course, but I don't mind having fun. Have a good weekend. Stephen looked at his watch and worried. They'd had a long talk with his mother today. He had told her that he had asked Kelly out on a date, but it was too soon to be happy. Of course, he needed Kelly's father's consent, so he waited with bated breath. As time went on, Kelly didn't call or write. He already thought that most likely her father found out something and forbade her to communicate with him. What should he do then? What to do? Had he lost everything? Maybe he's in a big hurry. Maybe he started this whole thing too soon. He probably should have waited a couple more months. He decided not to wait. So in his opinion, enough time had passed. What if this was the end of it? He chased all those bad thoughts out of his head as best he could, but they persisted. Suddenly, his phone beeped, and he realized it was a heart-stopping text message. He opened his phone and breathed a sigh of relief. Kelly, sorry it's late, but it's still on for tomorrow. He and Christina will drive themselves to the park. It was a victory. He rushed out of the room and ran to his mother. What son? Asked his mother anxiously, obviously having heard him rushing to her. Mom, we did it. You'll see a little more, and we'll have a wedding. Now I'm sure of everything. I'm so glad, my darling. You'll do so well tomorrow. Please be most considerate and gallant. A first date always makes a lasting impression on a girl. Do you understand me? I'll do everything right. You know me. At 12 o'clock, John arrived at Stephen's house by car. His friend on the phone last night asked him to go out with him. What does that have to do with me? Or can't you take a girl out on a date by yourself? Don't be ridiculous. She's not going out alone. She's going out with her friend. So please support me. Has our Stephen really fallen in love in his life? I haven't heard you talk me into it like that, have you? Well, tell me more about it. Who she is? She's so beautiful. John, you wouldn't understand me. And I'm not gonna say anything. Just tell me if you'll support me or not. But of course, when we don't support you, well, but for keeping quiet all this time. I resent you. I mean, you and I used to share everything. And then you got a girlfriend, and I still don't know anything. I didn't realize what happened to me at first, but that's beside the point. Listen, John, please, when you see her, please don't make any jokes. You got me. You're scaring me. Is there something wrong with her? You'll see tomorrow. Now, good night. See you tomorrow. And so they drove together in the car and didn't say a word. John saw that Stephen was thinking about something, but he didn't want to ask his friend anything. He must be really serious, because he had never seen him like this before. They pulled up to the park. John and Stephen got out of the car. There they are by that black car. I don't get it. Is she with security or something? Yeah, because I asked out the daughter of the man I work for. Robert, right? John, please don't make that face. It's not necessary right now. Besides, everybody's looking at us. She's gonna have a friend with her. So your job is to make her like you. Do you understand me? Because she's probably gonna have to go on dates with her first. They came over, and they said hello. John immediately noticed the beautiful girl in the wheelchair. She reminded him of a flower, just as beautiful, unwelcoming. Standing next to her was apparently her friend. They introduced themselves to each other and walked to the park. John Christina did not like her. He didn't like girls like that at all. He couldn't stand blondes. Kelly, on the other hand, was probably his type of brunette with beautiful blue eyes. It was so beautiful that when she looked at him, he was speechless because he couldn't take his eyes off her. "You girls are so quiet. It's not like we're in the park. It's like we're in some horrible place," said John cheerfully to lighten the mood. "It's just been so long since I've been in a public place that I don't even know how to act," Kelly said. "It's weird. Maybe I'm going to ask a stupid question, but I want to hear you say why you're a normal girl. You don't have anything that would turn people away from you. Or is there another reason?" Stephen pushed his friend to the side, showing him that he was prying into his own body. But Kelly still answered John, "Is it for you? I'm a normal person, but to a lot of people around me I'm not. They try to get around me and the other way around. It always feels like I'm a leper. This I met very often on my way and realized that it is better for me not to see it, so I tried not to go anywhere. Well, that's enough sadness. Let's have some fun. That's kind of what we came here for. Kelly, you've been on the Ferris wheel. You want a bird's eye view of the city. I haven't. How are we gonna do that? You're about to see it. John, go get your tickets. We're gonna show Kelly around." Kelly never had such a good time as the day they rode the Ferris wheel. Then Stephen took her on the carousel. She didn't agree to go on the other rides herself because she honestly admitted that she was scared because she had health problems. Then it was John's turn to ride with Christina, and Kelly and Stephen watched from the sidelines and ate ice cream. Kelly also remembered all the times Stephen would take her in his arms to put her on the merry-go-round or in the cab of the Ferris wheel. She couldn't explain how she felt at that moment. It felt really good. Kelly and Christina rode in the security car. John took Stephen home. "So how did you like Christina? Did you like the girl? But you know very well she's not my type. But I like today. The girls are very interesting, especially Kelly. I thought there was no one like her in the world anymore. That's with the brakes. She's my girlfriend. You get it, you get it. I'm not gonna beat her off just by reasoning with her. Although, believe me, if I'd met her sooner, you wouldn't have a chance. What makes you say that? I can tell she likes me." John didn't say anything. As he dropped Stephen off outside the house and drove to his house, his thoughts returned again to Kelly. He really liked this girl, but he could see that she only had eyes for Stephen. He didn't mind, and he was even happy for his friend. Just didn't like the whole thing. Be that as it may, and Stephen he had known for quite some time, and realized that he would never marry someone like Kelly. Besides, he would never even socialize with such people. And here he was, right here, he wouldn't leave her side. And that was very alarming. Stephen realized he couldn't wait any longer. He'd been seeing Kelly for 3 months now, and he was getting bored with it. He needed more of what he'd been going for all along. And his mom was getting impatient, saying it was probably time to propose, or someone else would show up. And then they'd steal her away from Stephen. And he didn't want that. So he decided it was time to take drastic measures. So he invited her to a restaurant. After that meeting in the park, Stephen was reassigned. He started earning more money and was finally able to buy a car. Now he drove Kelly everywhere by himself, and they didn't take John or Christina with them. So he called Kelly today and told her that he had a serious conversation with her and that he was taking her to a restaurant. "I don't like those phrases. It's scary," Kelly replied quietly as she listened to Stephen. "Don't be scared. It's okay. I just missed you. That's why I said that. Don't worry. I beg you." "Well, okay then. Tonight I'll what?" Before the date, my mother and I went to the jewelry store to buy a ring for Kelly. They argued for a long time, but then they decided. And finally, the ring was in his pocket in a velvet box. "Son, don't forget that even if she agrees, we have to ask for her father's hand in marriage, because you know he's a serious man. So we need to impress him. If you can do that, You can imagine how you will fly. He will immediately move you to a higher place, because it is not proper for the husband of the daughter to engage in inappropriate activities. As far as I know, Kelly herself is head of analytics. Smart girl, my ass. Who'd have thought it? She's really smart, if only she wasn't a cripple. Doesn't make any difference to me, though. I don't like her. She's not my type, you know. I prefer blondes, not like her. Just my son. The main thing is that she doesn't realize you don't like her. If she does, it's all over. You know what I mean. I understand perfectly. Don't worry, I won't let you down. There's a reason I've been through so much, and I know there's no turning back. Christina was in Kelly's room and watched with burning eyes as her friend tried on her wedding dress. Wow, that's gorgeous. You look beautiful in it. Who's the groom's date for the wedding? John. John, of course. And you're on my side. How are things going with him, by the way? It's not. He's made it very clear that I'm not his type. I really liked him a lot, though. I think I'm gonna give it another shot at your wedding. Maybe I'll get lucky. What do you think? Christina, but there's a lot of focus on him. I mean, there's plenty of other guys out there. Well, he doesn't like you, that's fine. But he's not the only one. You know, it seems like everything, it seems like it's not. But sometimes, you're attracted to him. He's a really nice guy. When I'm with him, for some reason I always feel protected. I guess a girl needs that. It's just a shame our feelings aren't mutual. It makes me very sad. By the way, I've always wanted to ask you, where will you live after the wedding in this house? Dad said it's my house, and that's where I should stay. I actually agree with him. I'm very happy here. Stephen doesn't mind. He agrees. He said they like it very much too. Yeah, it's really nice here. Are you going on a honeymoon after the wedding? Of course, my father's arranged something for us, but I don't know. I was told it was a surprise. Stephen seems to know, but he won't say anything. And I don't insist. It's better to be a surprise. Christina, I still think I'm dreaming. I always thought I'd never get married. I don't think I'd ever be noticed by any guy. And then there's Stephen, and he's so handsome. Come on, you're very handsome too. I mean, look at you. You're just stunning. Stephen saw that and fell in love. That's right. I really want you to be happy. Kelly looked at her friend, thinking that they would be happy with Stephen, and thought that nothing could interfere with their happiness. Stephen arrived home and went straight into the kitchen. He looked at his mother glumly but said nothing. Son, I see you've got something going on. You won't tell me. I'm fed up. I can't stand it. To tell you the truth, I can't look at my wife. I'm so sick of her, but I can't stand it. And she's so right, so smart. She makes me sick. And I can't do anything. Unless it's with her, I'll lose everything. And I didn't work so hard to lose everything. What am I gonna do? Help me. Don't even think about divorce. Besides, Kelly's a beautiful girl. I don't understand what else you need. You have everything. You don't need anything. What do you need, son? I like another girl. I'm getting serious with her. You see, I love her. You see, I'm young, I'm handsome. Shouldn't I be happy? Why should I have to live with an invalid and suffer like this? Is that what you raised me for? You see, son, don't you feel bad? You're the richest man in the world now. You can afford anything you want, and because of your love, you'll lose everything. Do you understand? Just understand. Money doesn't come easy to anyone, and you just married a millionaire's daughter and still managed to complain. I see you've stopped thinking. Everything was fine, but you've gone off the rails. If your father-in-law finds out you're having an affair, he'll never forgive you. You know what I mean? And even here, I can't help you. I understand all that. So I came to you for advice. What do I do? What do I do? Miranda got up from the table and went to the window. She was silent for a long time, apparently thinking about something. Stephen looked at his mother and waited to see what she would finally say to him. I understand, and I share your feelings. To be honest, I haven't been lucky enough to be happy in my life. I don't want you to repeat my fate, but what I'm about to offer you is very serious. And think about whether you're capable of doing it for your own happiness. Mom, you know me. I'm always willing to go the extra mile if it's really worth it. All right. Chuckles, are you willing to wait a year to be a really happy person? A year? Why not a year? Why don't you tell me if you're willing to wait a year? I think so. If it makes me happy. Then listen carefully. It's been a long time since you and Kelly went on vacation. Besides, she's used to your luxurious life, so you suggest she go somewhere in the woods, in the country, where there's no civilization. For example, to live in a tent, to fish in the river. There's not much to do in nature. I think she'd like that. Besides, as far as I understand, with you she feels protected, so she'll go along with anything. So when you get there, you should take a good look around the area. See if there are people around, so that there are no witnesses. And then just throw her off a cliff or into the river, presenting it as an accident. Do you understand me? And the most important thing is that I don't say anything about this vacation right away. Just give her the idea that she would like to go to the nature, so that no one would guess anything. Stephen silence. He was thinking of making an accident for his wife, but he didn't know how. But his mother had explained it all so well that he knew he would do it. All he had to do was talk Kelly into it, because he knew she wasn't a nature lover. Stephen met up with John just before he left for vacation. They sat down in a cafe to talk for a while. But how are you doing? I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm fine. I just thought since you're a family man, you shouldn't be distracted. Oh, come on. I'm tired of being a family man. I'm exhausted. Oh, well, you wouldn't understand me anyway. You're a single man. Explain it to me. I just thought you liked Kelly, and now something's wrong. Don't worry about it. I'm just saying that. Listen, my wife and I are going on a camping trip. I want to teach her how to fish, how to live in a tent, and show her how good it is out there. We'll have a vacation together, and things will get better. I always thought you hated the outdoors. Besides, why go there with Kelly? You know, she's a little different from us. It would be hard on her, only it's not my idea. It's hers, so you have to do it. You know, she's used to getting everything she wants. Now I'm her husband, and I do all her whims. John frowned, because he knew that Kelly was nothing like Stephen was describing her now, although he just maybe didn't know her enough. Or maybe she acts so incomprehensible to him, although he had talked to Christina back then, when they were still on a date together. She was telling him about Kelly, and he'd heard nothing but good things about her. How kind, smart, fair. That's when he drew his conclusions about her. And he watched Kelly himself, and came to the same opinion that she's a wonderful person. And then he hears from Stephen not at all flattering comments, and what to think now he didn't know. Although, looking at his friend, he saw that he became some kind of wooden, angry. Everything irritated him, and he didn't like it at all. When you're going, I'll see you again. Yeah, if only at the end of the week. Because we're all set for next Monday. Let's move. John was fine with that. He hated not understanding things. He saw that his friend was nervous for some reason, and he didn't like it at all. And for some reason he felt uneasy, and he knew that this uneasiness had something to do with Kel. Then he decided to follow Stephen a little. The father looked at his daughter anxiously and did not share her optimism. You don't know what you're talking about. You nature two things are incompatible. I'm worried about you. Besides, we decided to go alone. What the hell is that? Dad, I didn't get it at first either, but as it turns out, it's not far from here. So don't worry about it. And it's connected. You're talking to me like I'm going to the jungle, but that's not where I'm going. Oh, I see. Why do you want to go to the wilderness? I don't know. I saw a movie with Stephen the other day. They were making soup, and he told me that he and his class used to go camping. And they made soup just like that, and that he would never forget the taste. So I wanted to. You know, I've never tasted anything like it. He went to his daughter and hugged her. It was true, his girl had not seen a lot of things in her life, and how happy he was for her now, seeing that she was living a full life. And he, in turn, would do anything for her just to make his daughter happy. John was already on his second day of driving around town for Stephen. He took a special day off. I don't know why he'd do that, but for some reason he had an uneasy feeling that Stephen was up to no good. By the end of the second day, he decided that he would not follow his friend anymore because he was only traveling for work. But by the evening, he saw what he probably expected to see. It shook him up pretty badly. He was glad that on Saturday they would meet again, and then he would ask him what he wanted after all. And if it was true, he'd better get it all out of his head before it was too late. Kelly happily gathered herself for this dreamy walk. Christina looked at her friend anxiously. I don't know why they had to go into the woods. I mean, really, Kelly, what's gotten into you? I'm sorry to say these things, but this isn't the city. It's hard for a man with legs, aren't you? I'm sorry again, but I'm really trying to understand you. It's no big deal. We'll take a romantic camping trip. Have you ever heard? I've never been outdoors, and I really want to. Plus, you're like my dad. What are you so worried about? You'd think I'd be leaving home hundreds of miles away. And this is right next door. Stephen showed me on the map that it's close to here. You can check it out for yourself. Yes? And then there's cell service. So call me every day and I'll let you know how I'm doing. I know it's hard for Stephen to listen to me talk sometimes, so I'm gonna tell my impressions to myself. And Christina frowned. It seemed to her that when Kelly talked about Stephen, she became sad. She wanted to ask her friend if everything was normal in her family life. But she didn't, because she knew that if Kelly wanted to tell her something, she would have done it. John never got to meet Stephen. He said he had a lot of things to do and couldn't get out for meetings. And on Monday morning, he left with Kelly for the woods, and for some reason John didn't like this idea, though he couldn't understand it himself. Why? Kelly excitedly looked around at the birds that were hovering around her. There was some rustling, and she turned her head with delight, looking at them with interest. Stephen assembled the tent with a smile, watching his wife. Stephen, what's that strange knocking? It's that uncle. There are many of them. They are the sanitarians of the forest. If it weren't for them, many trees would be dead by now. What's that cracking noise? Is it so strange? It doesn't sound like a rhinoceros. It's a grouse. There's a lot of them here too. It's a protected area, and all birds and animals are protected. And there are bears here. There are, but they don't come here. We're not in the middle of a protected area after all. I know we can't take any risks, but this is perfect. So don't worry. There won't be any animals attacking. When night fell, Kelly couldn't sleep for a long time. She tried to lie down, but she realized that wasn't the point. She was constantly distracted by some rustling, some fussing. She was a little scared. But then she looked at Stephen, who had been asleep for a long time, and calmed down. If her husband was calm, then she needn't worry at all. And toward morning, when she finally fell asleep, she had a strange dream. Her husband was pushing her into the abyss and smiling at her. She couldn't believe what was happening. Then, as she began to fall, she woke up screaming. Stephen looked into the tent and smiled. Finally, I thought I had you sleeping all day. You know how people are like that when they get to the countryside. They want to sleep. My mom used to tell me she had a friend like that. It was impossible to go out with her. She'd lie down and sleep. That's what the fresh air did to her. How are you feeling? I'm fine. You look a little pale. I just had a bad dream. You know, I was really scared. It's just the new place has got to you. All the excitement, the noise. You're not rested. I had a stupid dream too. Kelly washed his face in a very unpleasant way. I seem to remember the whole dream, and it felt like it was real. She saw it so clearly. It was very unpleasant. I made some coffee and we went fishing. I found a beautiful spot. You'll love watching me fish. They had breakfast. And then Stephen took the fishing rods and rolled the baby carriage. Kelly to the river. She could hear her because there was a noise coming from there. Apparently the river was fast. But Kelly couldn't see it from behind the trees. Besides, she couldn't swim, and she didn't like water at all. She had always had a fear of water. Soon the trees parted, and she saw the river, not very wide but still fast. They found themselves on a platform that ended in a cliff. She was frightened and looked at Stephen. "So you're afraid your baby carriage will roll? Don't worry. I've got it all figured out. I'll put it where you can see me fishing and not get hurt." Kelly smiled and felt a little calmer. She began to admire nature again and look around. Suddenly, she thought she saw someone hiding in the distance. She could have sworn that she could even feel the eyes on her. But then she thought that it was probably her imagination playing tricks on her after the night. And then carefully, looking again at the spot, she saw nothing else. Stephen cast the rod, and she began to watch with interest. Soon he caught the first fish. She didn't know what the fish was called, but she didn't care. She watched it with delight as her husband placed it near the stroller. Then he cast the rod again and caught a small fish again. She was having fun. Kelly was oblivious to everything. Watching the fishing for the third time, she caught a big fish, and she saw that her husband was having a hard time pulling it out. "Mash, I need a net. I can't get it out this way. Help me. What should I do?" "Just take the net. It's not far from you, and give it to me. Don't be afraid of anything. There's no tablecloth down there. I'm watching you." Kelly quickly picked up the net and wheeled the wheelchair over to her husband to hand it to him. But then she saw Stephen put down the rod and turn toward her. It was as if time had slowed down for her. She didn't realize what he was doing, and he just took her by the stroller, pulled her up to him, and looked into the classrooms. "But what is it, sweetheart? It's time for you and me to say goodbye. If you only knew how bored I am with you. I want to live my life. You know, love who I want. I never even liked you. I married you for your money. Well, now it's goodbye. It's over. I'm finally rid of you." Kelly looked at Stephen in horror, remembering her dream. But how? How is this possible? He was her husband, her favorite person, the one she was happy with. And so he was unhappy with her. So he was faking it. But what does it matter? What is she thinking? She's going to die anyway. She can't save herself in water like this. She can't swim. Besides, half her body doesn't work, and she can't do anything. And that's when Stephen pushed her down. The last thing she saw was him smiling. Robert couldn't find a place to go. Rescuers had been working for the third day, but Kelly's body had not yet been found. "Believe me, we'll do what we can, but it's possible she was carried away much faster than we think, and we need to widen the search. Anything could have happened. Maybe she got sucked into some kind of whirlpool. Or is she lying on the bottom right now? Get the right divers. Get the right divers. Get whoever you want. My daughter. Find her. I'll pay you. Only, please, my children, her." He looked at his son-in-law, who walked with a pale face. He felt sorry for him. After all, the first thing he had done was to attack him without realizing what he was doing. But Stephen stoically endured everything, realizing what a grief it was. Besides, he himself rushed after her, only he could not understand where she had gone. They found the baby carriage not far from where they were fishing, but Kelly's body was gone. John drove over to Christina's house to talk to her. She happily came out to him. "I really don't know what it's about. Hi, Christina. Long time no see. How are you doing? Everything okay? John, what brings you here? I need to talk to you. Listen, you were at Kelly's the other night. Before they went on that camping trip, right? Yeah, and you didn't notice anything weird. I mean, maybe Kelly was scared or sad. No, everything was fine. She was happy and so excited to go on a nature trip. And then this happened. I still can't believe it. I feel sorry for Robert. He's been so down since his daughter died. He's not like himself. Why do you ask? It just came to me. I'm still in shock myself. You're right. But wait, I did think Kelly was hiding something from me. And it's about Stephen. I don't know why, but I felt like I didn't have to ask her anything because I knew my friend so well. If she doesn't want to talk, there's no way she'll say anything. I thought I'd talk to her after the trip. And you see how it turned out. John nodded. In fact, that was all he wanted to hear. He got into the car as he saw that he had a missed call on his phone. Looking at the screen, he saw that Stephen was calling him. It had been a long time since they had talked. He didn't insist, realizing that he didn't really care about him right now. Stephen, hi. You called me, but where have you been? Friend, I've been waiting for you to call. But you've completely forgotten about me. I just didn't think you cared about me. You can't stop grieving, though. But what's happened is that I'm going to die of sadness. We're all mortal. Today we are someone else tomorrow, vice versa. So you have to live and enjoy every day. Listen, let's go to a restaurant tonight. I'm sick of everything. I want to relax a little. Okay, let's do it. What time? Let's make it 6 o'clock. I don't have anything to do. I'm afraid I won't have time. I could go out of town for work. Let's make it 8. I think I'll be done by then. John wondered why Stephen suddenly wanted to go to a restaurant. If it were him, he'd probably be pining for Kelly. And nothing in his life would make him happy anymore. Stephen's doing fine. He moved on. He didn't care about anything else. He was free. He didn't get home until 8 o'clock, as he'd hoped. He barely made it home in time to shower and change. At exactly 8 o'clock, he pulled up to the restaurant Stephen had told him. Someone was sitting at a table drinking cognac. I was afraid you weren't coming. I called your phone again, but it was unavailable. I told you I went to the country, and there's no reception there. It was just a work thing. We're building a small factory there, so I have to go there all the time to check what's going on. Realizing you don't have a good job, I'll get you a job at our company. My father-in-law will do everything for me. All I have to say is you'll make a lot of money. Besides, I'm gonna get it all soon. Kelly, my girlfriend's smart. She even left a will. And I'm the full owner of her stock, her share of the company. So I'm a rich man, and I put in a good word for you. Besides, I need my own people in the company. I'm tired of dealing with my father-in-law's men. It's time for me to get my own people. Not yet. I've got 6 more months to go, but I think I can do it. But what about you? Are you in? I'll think about my offer, but I'll give you an answer later, because I can't let down my boss, with whom we have a contract. When the construction is finished, we'll talk then. I think it'll be finished in 6 months. By then, I hope you haven't changed your mind about taking me in. I haven't changed my mind. You're my friend. If you knew, John, how sometimes I wish I could talk frankly, only I can't. And I have a lot to say. John could see that Stephen was a little drunk and decided to push him a little on the subject he was so interested in. Namely, what had happened on the cliff. He didn't believe it was an accident. You know me. You can trust me with anything. I'll always listen to you. I'll even give you advice if you need it. You see, I'm in love, and it's so hard not being together. I think about her all the time. I can't sleep. I can't eat without her. Can you tell me what to do? John frowned. He hadn't expected that from Stephen. I understand, Stephen, but you said yourself that you have to move on. Kelly's not coming back, and that's why. What's Kelly got to do with it? I never loved her. I only wanted her so I could live like this now, so I could be rich and not think about tomorrow. I'm talking about Sophia, you know. As soon as I saw her, I fell in love with her. But my father-in-law's always on the lookout, so I've been seeing her on the sly and in secret. Now she wants me to marry her, and I have to keep mourning for another 6 months, but I'm afraid that doesn't suit her. And if she doesn't wait for me, What am I supposed to do? Then she's not your woman, and she doesn't love you. Cold, John replied. He felt uncomfortable sitting at the same table with a man like Stephen. He couldn't even understand when this had happened to him. He used to be a normal guy. And now what had he become? Stephen didn't seem to notice how John had changed. He kept ranting. And that father-in-law is always hanging around me. I'm sick of him, but I don't give a damn. I couldn't take care of my little girl. That's not my problem. You shouldn't have let us go to the country then. I'm sick of them all. You should know how much I hate them all. John didn't want to hear any more. He was disgusted. He got up and said that he had an urgent matter to solve. She opened the classrooms, not realizing where the body was. Everything hurt terribly. It felt like she had been ground through a meat grinder. She wanted to lift her head, but she couldn't. She closed her eyes again and fell into sleep. When she woke up again, she realized she was alone again. There was no one around, but she felt a little better herself, and she felt a soft warmth. She turned her head to see where she was. The house was clean. Pickett wasn't very cozy. The sun played bunnies on the floor and on the windowsill. White curtains fluttered in the wind, and the smell of wormwood wafted to her. She closed her eyes again. Could she be in heaven? When she's ready to stay here forever? She closed her eyes again when suddenly she heard footsteps on the porch. Someone was coming, and she didn't want to show that she'd come to her senses at first. To see for herself if she should trust this person or not. What if it was her husband? The memory of him made her chest ache again. She didn't understand how he could do that to her. It turned out to be very simple. He didn't love her. That's all. Someone was walking in the room. Then he came to her bed and leaned over. She couldn't stand it, opened her eyes and cried out. It was John. Kelly, just don't be afraid of me. I didn't hurt you. Kelly nodded. Tears rolled from her eyes. She didn't remember well what had happened to her then after the fall. She remembered well the cold blows and then being carried somewhere. Then she felt someone grab her. She saw it was John and lost consciousness. Then when she came to, she thought she'd dreamed it all up. But it turned out he had saved her. Then what should she do? He's a close friend of her husband's, so she doesn't have long to live. Soon he'll show up and finish the job, and she won't be able to do anything. She's helpless on this bed. Plus her whole body still hurts so far, so she can't even move. John looked at her and gently wiped the tears from her cheeks. She closed her eyes again, but out of fear. Don't be afraid of me, Mash. I'm sorry it happened like that. I was late. Until the last I didn't think Stephen was capable of such a thing. But to be honest, I felt something and followed you. Kelly opened her eyes and looked at John, so she wasn't imagining it. And she really felt followed. So it was you who was watching us on the fishing trip. Yeah, that was me. I'm sorry I was almost late, but it's okay. I managed to save you. I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do next. I mean, he wanted to kill you. And I still can't believe it. How long have I been here? Almost 3 weeks is a long time to recover. My grandmother lives here, and she's been treating you. We were really scared for you, and I told her that if things continued to get this bad, I would take you into town and tell your father. If you want, I can take you now. Dad's there. I don't want to go anywhere yet. I need to think about it. I know it's wrong, but I need to get my head together. Kelly has been living with her grandmother Vera for 6 months now, helping her with herbs, learning how to brew them properly. She was waiting now too. Grandmother was looking out the window. It was raining outside today. It had been raining since morning, and it was unclear whether it would go on all day or end soon. Then she remembered the meeting with her father and smiled. It had been a week since that conversation with John. She didn't want to see anyone was so depressed she didn't want to live herself. Then she thought about her father and realized that it wasn't his fault, that he had always tried to do everything for her. She was just mocking him now. When John came again to see how she was doing, she told him to bring her father to her. But what better way to do it? From what I understand, You wouldn't want Stephen to find out. It's too soon for him to know I'm back from the dead. But you should tell your father. I don't want him jeopardizing his health for me. Then do this. I'll tell him how to get an appointment. As I recall, he was interested in some land he wanted to buy. You'll have to offer him a place. Tell him it's right for him. I'll give you the details in a moment. Adding that you don't need intermediaries, that he's the one who should see the place. He'll understand and go with you. Besides, he already knows you a little bit, and I think he won't resist. Just make sure he doesn't recognize Stephen. Okay, Kelly, I'll do as you say. And John, when you get to the place, I want you to prepare him a little bit, because I'm really worried about him, because I don't want him to get hurt. She'll never forget the look on his face when he saw her. The two of them cried and talked for a long time then. John and Grandma waited for them outside. And when they'd had enough, they sat down to tea together. I don't understand how you can wait so long. We have to catch him now and put him in jail. He wanted to kill you. I'm sorry, Dad, but that would be easy for him. And I want revenge. I'm not an evil man, but I can't forgive this. And you know very well how I felt about him. And he knew it. If he had told me the truth, that he wanted a divorce, that he just wanted more money, I would have given him everything. I wouldn't have been sorry. That's why I want to prepare a little bit too, like he's been preparing all this time. John, thank you so much for your daughter. If it wasn't for you, I don't know what would have happened to my little girl. How can I ever thank you? Why don't you join my company? That's the kind of guy I need out there. I'd love to work for you, Robert. I'm afraid I can't yet. Stephen will get the wrong idea. He'll start asking questions, and he might get suspicious. Let's talk about it after this is over. You're right. We'll talk about it after. Now we're going. Come on, daughter. Get ready. Dad, I'm gonna stay here. It's better for everyone. Stephen doesn't live in our house now, but he can come anytime. Besides, I'll be seen by Aunt Clara, your guards, and there's a lot of people there. Even though they're loyal to you, they can still negotiate. So I'll stay here. And you can come and see me anytime. Robert didn't argue. He could see that his daughter was doing very well here. Besides, her grandmother said she was still in treatment, and it would be better for Kelly to stay here. So she's been delayed. It's been over 6 months. A little longer and soon everything will be back to normal. She'll go back to her father. She'll be back at the company, working and living like nothing ever happened. But it won't be like before. She'll constantly think about what Stephen did to her, but it didn't bother her as much as it used to. She started thinking about John a lot. I really liked that guy, especially his attitude toward her. She began to see the difference between John and Stephen, realized how wrong she'd been. She had mistaken flirting for love. John really loved her, and it showed. Stephen arrived home, and the first thing he did was go into the kitchen. Mom was sitting there reading a magazine. She looked at her son and smiled well. Son, there is not much left, and soon there will be everything you have dreamed of for so long. And what's so overcast? It seems to me that you should rejoice, because the victory is ours. So I am. I'm not happy though. You know, I feel like my father-in-law's been weird with me lately. The first time he was in mourning, I was doing all the work. And then all of a sudden, it's like he's gone. He won't let me do anything. And now he's giving the most important things not to me, but to his deputy. I thought I was his right-hand man. Now I don't know what's going on in the company. It's disturbing. It's really weird. What's he saying? You asked him about it, right? He doesn't say much. He barely talks to me. And the best part is he doesn't even mention his daughter. And he's having fun. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what's going on. It's probably a defensive reaction to what's going on. He realized that he lost his daughter, but naturally, it makes him feel very bad. Our body at such moments tries to put a protective block, and a person begins to live as if nothing had happened. It's okay. Just be patient. Soon half of the company will go to you, as he will have to reckon with you. The main thing is, son, you did it. You did the right thing. And I'm also here to see you about Sophia. I wanted to ask you how things are going over there. It's not good. I've got her so much money. I'm broke. I'm waiting for the inheritance to come to me, and I still don't know where we're putting it. You've got good taste, son. Well, it's up to you, of course, but be careful with her. It's not long before she's pantsless. John sadly realized that Kelly would be leaving his grandmother's tonight. That's right, it's time. Tomorrow, Stephen would go to the notary to sign the necessary papers and receive the inheritance. But that wasn't the point. It seemed to him that as soon as Kelly left for the city, a wall would grow between them. She wouldn't want to hang out with him anymore. After all, they were so good together. He saw it and felt it. Kiryusha, why are you so sad? Something happened. He looked at Kelly, wanted to say that no, but then remembered that they agreed to tell each other the truth. And it was only on the truth that they'd built this fragile relationship. I'm afraid of losing you. I feel like as soon as you cross the threshold and leave, you'll forget about me. John, what are you talking about? You saved my life. That's one thing. And second of all, I've gotten to know you over the past year. I know a certain kind of person, and believe me, I'm not gonna let you go that easily. I feel good with you. I really hope to continue our communication with you. Stephen drove to the notary's office. At the appointed time, he saw his father-in-law's car and grimaced. He thought that he had absolutely nothing to do here, but apparently he had to be present at the reading of the will. All right, let him be here if it wouldn't interfere with anything. He has endured the morning, and now he can go about his business and his life in peace. Robert was no one to him now. He was on his way to the building when he saw his friend John pull up. They hadn't spoken much lately. Stephen had called him, but he kept saying he was busy and couldn't meet him. Hi, what are you doing here? I had some business to check out. Why are you here? Well, it's my birthday. It's been a year, and I'm inheriting the estate that my untimely departed Janny left me. I propose to celebrate tonight at the restaurant. Are you coming to congratulate me? Probably not. It's a celebration without me. I think you'll find someone. Who to celebrate with? Hey, did you get a girlfriend? 'Cause you weren't like this before. You were always hanging out with me. And now you're like a stranger. You're right. I have a girlfriend. She and I are in love. And I really hope we get married soon. But you have to. You'll invite me to the wedding. You know, somehow, I don't think you'll have time for me. Besides, you're getting an inheritance, and that opens up a whole new set of prospects for you. So you won't have time for my wedding. Well, you mean, invite me. Maybe I can make time for you. John did not answer, but walked silently forward and out of the door. Stephen looked after him, not understanding what had happened to his friend. He had seen the way he looked at him today and did not understand the reason. Then it became clear to him. John was just jealous of him. Understandably, he has to work all the time. When Stephen's life was going great, and now it would be even better. The notary didn't see him at the appointed time. He had to wait another half hour, but Stephen didn't care. There was no hurry now. Everything went as smoothly as possible. No one noticed anything. No one guessed anything, and he would wait. He waited a year, so now it's just a half hour for him. And finally, he was invited. He walked into the office with a smile and froze. First he saw her. She was sitting next to her father in his wheelchair, and she looked beautiful. It was Kelly, the living Kelly. Standing next to her was John. Stephen noticed that Kelly was holding his hand. He didn't realize what was happening. He thought at first that he was just going crazy with joy, or that he was just dreaming. And then he'd wake up, and it would all go away. It's not gonna happen. And he'd have everything just the way he wanted it. The cops came up to him, cuffed his hands. They talked about how he was accused of killing his wife. But he wasn't interested in hearing it. It came to him that everything was gone, that he had not become a millionaire and the owner of the company, that now he would be shut down, and he would now be in jail. Then he looked at John. I remembered his words that he would not invite him to the wedding, that Stephen simply would not have time to come to them. So he knew everything. Well, why didn't he tell them? What do you care? He's still going to jail for killing his wife.